Welcome to this Salt Lake City School District Board of Education meeting. Today is March 4th, 2025. Mohammed Bade, Board Member Bade, is running late and will join us in a little bit. And Bryce Williams, Board Member Williams, is excused this evening. We do have the need for a closed executive session, and I'll entertain a motion.
On March 4th, 2025, I move that the board go into closed executive session to discuss the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual, pending or reasonably imminent litigation, and collective bargaining.
I second.
All right, we've got a motion and a second on the table. Any discussion? All right, seeing none, we'll start with a roll call vote with Board Member Anderson.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Brian Jensen, yes.
Amanda Longley, yes.
Charlotte Fife Jefferson, yes.
All right, that motion passes. We'll be back in about an hour. Thanks, everybody.
Does the legislature want us to call collective bargaining going forward? Because it's still in the code.
They're going to have to change that.
Christina has a,
But like the code still says collective bargaining.
I think they're trying to get someone to sponsor
Run a bill
legislation
to realize their mistake.
Oh, really?
So, did you see the latest email I sent you? Yeah. So, they're telling us, we have to have, no, I know that you've estimated construction beginning of safety. Can we just, yeah, they don't, they seem to say fall of 2026. That's what we need. They say it doesn't have to be that, doesn't have to be. You're good, thank you. That's what I figured. So, the other stuff I think is good for now. It's all in order. That is what I can say. Okay. Like I say, all they say is that it has to be exact time. I don't know who made this law. Okay, I will. How good is your trivial knowledge of our data? Pretty good.
right, good evening, everybody. Thank you for rejoining us online and for everybody that's joined us while we were in our closed executive session. Today is March 4th. We are here for the purposes of a Salt Lake City School District Board of Education meeting. I do want to announce that Board Member Williams will be out this evening and is excused. First off, we need to have the Pledge of Allegiance, and I have asked Mia and Aurora to step up from our audience to lead us in the pledge this evening. Come on up, ladies. Start when you're ready, okay? Thank you, ladies. You did an awesome job. I also want to take a couple moments to acknowledge our association presidents. We have Buildings and Grounds and President Aaliyah Ocampo. For Child Nutrition, we have President Tanya Slaughter. For SLEA, we have President Mike Harmon and Vice President Chelsea Acosta, who are with us this evening. Thanks for being here. And for our Salt Lake Association of School Administrators, or SLASA, we have President Adrian Lobato. The next item on our opening items is our recognitions. We have the Math Counts winners, and we have Holly McIntosh and Allison Espinoza to introduce our Math Counts winners.
Good evening, everyone, and to you too. Thank you for the opportunity to present our Math Counts awardees for you tonight. Salt Lake City School District's Math Department has been supporting Math Counts competitions in our district for over 15 years, and it is really growing. We had 160 sixth graders, seventh graders, and eighth graders registered to participate this year, and that's up 35% from last year, so maybe even over 35%. But we're going to estimate, we'll do mathish tonight, not be precise, but anyway, that's great enthusiasm and interest in Math Counts. Math Counts is a national program that provides middle school students the opportunities to compete individually and in teams, so against and alongside their colleagues. The teams focus on problem solving, teamwork, and computation. They prepare and practice all year for the events that they participate in. And Math Counts really focuses on middle school students because they realize it's a critical time to foster a passion for mathematics and a love of mathematics. We're celebrating the awardees tonight, but I also want to honor everybody who participated. Because what really happens in these events is the awards are nice, but it's so important that we focus on the growth. What you learn and what you develop by participating is what matters most. So stepping up, and I'm talking to all of you now, stepping up for new opportunities like Math Counts is how you grow your skills and your knowledge and your dispositions about mathematics. It's how you grow your confidence and your stamina and your math identity. And when you step up for these things, you really grow. It's a good thing to remember. It's not just about having the lucky math gene. It's much more about the hard work and the extra effort that you put in. So we want to honor everybody in that way. Dr. Allison Espinoza, one of our middle school math coaches, was the point person for the math department on Math Counts. So I'm going to let her tell a little bit more about Math Counts and present our school team leaders as well as our student awardees.
Hi, thank you, Holly. Yeah, so as Holly mentioned, Math Counts is a competition for students in grades 6 through 8, and it can be a really exciting and unique opportunity for those of us in middle school and those of us in elementary to collaborate and really bring students together in an academic setting. During the Math Counts competition, students engage in rigorous and interesting math problem solving, both individually and in a collaborative structure. It gives them a chance to explore some mathematics outside of the content, the core content standards that they see in their math classes, and just generally build, as Holly mentioned, their math confidence, strengthen their math identity, and participate in our Salt Lake math community. For some of our teams, the Math Counts competition in Salt Lake City School District is a culminating event. And for other teams, it's just more of a stepping stone before they compete in the state level Math Counts competition, or perhaps even in some years, they then get to go on to the national Math Counts competition. Or other competitions in the state. I know that we have some Salt Lake students that are going to be participating in Utah Valley University's math competition next week, and we hope that that our competition helped prepare them for that experience as well. So as Holly mentioned, our program really grew this year. We had 9 different teams compete, and they were supported by 8 different teachers and 2 of our elementary math content area specialists. So those educators invested their professional and likely personal time in preparing students for the competition, both in providing instruction and access to resources, whether they were doing that as an after-school club or doing it by embedding some of the Math Counts materials within their core instruction as a way of differentiating or extending the learning for students. It was definitely a time investment for both the teachers, the educators who were doing that work, as well as the students who were preparing for the competition. So I'm just excited that we get to be here today to celebrate their efforts. Yeah, at this time, I would like to recognize the teachers and the award winners. So Math Counts, we have a couple coaches, I believe, that are here today. I'm going to invite them to join me here, and I'll share the microphone with them if they don't mind, so they can help me recognize our students. So we have quite a few students who received awards that we're going to recognize tonight. So let's start here. First, I'm going to just recognize Julie Henderson. So she's at Indian Hills Elementary School. She is a teacher at Indian Hills who is the coach for that team. And she had her student Elise Allen received an award in the competition for the Best in School award. Is Elise here? Come on up.
Good job, we could have them come stand up there as they
That'd be
get
wonderful.
their certificates or something? Would that work?
Yeah, come on up here.
Thank you.
Just stay there while everybody else comes down.
So Alexander Brown was the teacher at Franklin Elementary School, and his student Skylar Minicattle received the Best in School award. Skylar? Thank you. Okay. At Whittier Elementary School, Riley Jones was the educator who supported their team. Is Riley here? Okay. And actually, I think I might have... So let me come back to that. Tina Jensen is the teacher at Nibley Park who supported the DLI team. Is Tina here? Are any of the Nibley Park DLI students from that team here? Michelle Ikubo is the teacher at Hillside Middle School, and she supported the Hillside team. Okay. Ariel Nelson was the countdown round finalist. Ariel also received the Best in School award. So congratulations for that as well. From Ensign Elementary School, Christina Richards was the teacher who coached that team. Is Christina here? Okay. Well, let's recognize Benjamin Fournier. He received the Best in School award at Ensign. Thank you. Paula Orosa Chocatia is the she's a content area specialist at Nibley Park, and she supported a team from Nibley Park as well. And her student, oops, sorry y'all, I'm getting my pages here in order. Damian Galvez received the Best of School award.
good thing to have so many.
I know, there's so many papers, right? So we have Richard Davis, who's here from Clayton Middle School, and he was our teacher coach. Richard, I'd love for you to come help me recognize your award winners here. Would you recognize our students here?
Okay, so we had our team that got second runner-up in the team competition. That's Desmond Quintana. Also on the team was Isaiah Spencer. Max Francis was on the team. While we're on the subject, Max Francis also got the Best in School award, as well as he finished 5th in the countdown round. Peter Lundmark was on the team, but he couldn't make it tonight. And also in the top 10 countdown was Cormac Candy. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Okay, I know I mentioned earlier that Tina Jensen was the teacher coach of the Nibley Park DLI team. Anna Gia was their Best of School Award recipient. So congratulations to Anna Gia. Okay, and that brings us, we have some award winners as well from West High School in their 7-8 program. So Todd Vaudry was the teacher coach, and some of his students won the individual awards. So we had our first place individual award winner was Adwita Mandawal. And her sister, Ashita Mandawal, actually received the second place individual award. In addition, Frederick Powell from West High School. He was a countdown round finalist. He was also received a team award as well. So congratulations to Frederick Powell. Ivan Mahanti was also a team award recipient. And Josh Zhang was a team award recipient as well, in addition to Ethan Kim. Elijah Johnson, Bowen Dong, Melinda Zhao, Aditi Nagalangam, and we have quite an impressive West showing. And I believe that these are folks now that I'm getting to that have won multiple awards. I think I said Ethan Kim's name, but I'm going to recognize him again as a countdown round finalist. I believe that that might conclude our award recipients. So thank you for allowing us the time to recognize our award winners and just celebrate the performance of our mathematicians in Salt Lake who competed. Thanks, y'all.
Woo, way to go.
Yeah? We'll take one picture, then you two can get into the next one, okay? Look at the board in there as well. Okay, you two come in. We really want, I think we're. Okay.
Congratulations, winners. Thank you, teachers and students, for all of your accomplishments, and teachers, everything you're doing to make sure that these programs are successful for our students. Up next on our agenda, we have the consent agenda, and I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented or as posted.
Second.
All right, we got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion to the motion? All right, seeing none, we'll start with a roll call vote with Charlotte.
Fife Jefferson, yes.
Ashley?
It's me? Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed Baid, yes.
Ryan Jensen, yes.
Amanda Longwell, yes.
All right, that motion passes. Up next on our agenda is our request to speak. The board's asked me to read some guidelines that govern your comments this evening. The board enjoys the opportunity to hear from the public during the comment portion of its meetings. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to remind you of our board rules governing your comments. The total time served for public comment is not to exceed 15 minutes, with all speakers or groups limited to 3 minutes. The board will not allow public comments during board meetings that are slanderous, obscene, or otherwise violate state or federal law. Employees and/or their representatives may not use the public comment period to address issues that should be raised through existing formal communication channels or established grievance or negotiation procedures. I'd also like to explain that unless the speaker's topic is already on the agenda, state law prohibits the board from taking action on items raised during the public comment period. However, if it seems appropriate to the circumstances, I may direct district staff to follow up with the speaker on the topic discussed. Our first speaker this evening is Diane Krim. Diane, welcome.
Greetings. My name is Diane Krim, and this year I will finish my 36th year as a middle school teacher in Salt Lake City School District. I am one of the teachers from SLCSD Bryant that came to the board meeting last spring to advocate for focus on middle school. Today I return to you to share both deep gratitude and what I also believe is urgent feedback. Dr. Grant, thank you not only for listening to us, but taking action to create this middle school working group. It is concerns about the implementation of this committee's work that it brings me here today. I hope you will receive the feedback in the way I intended, as a chance to refine this important process of gathering and integrating input from stakeholders. You've received an email from one of the two teachers on the committee expressing concerns about the composition of the committee and the top-down and unclear nature of the process. To this, I would like to add my own experience. The working group began its meetings in September 2024. I kept myself informed about the committee's progress by checking in with both of the teachers on the committee. This is why I found myself befuddled during a November meeting with Mr. Miller, where he told us that the district would be requiring all middle schools to offer accelerated and honors classes in mathematics. I went to the teachers on the committee and asked about this statement. Not only was this not agreed upon, but it contradicted what they learned at one of the exemplary middle schools the committee visited. When describing the keys to his students' academic and social success, the principal at Eisenhower Junior High explained that the first thing they did was eliminate honors classes. He went on to explain how detracting students and creating heterogeneous classes with rigorous curriculum had resulted in better outcomes for all. Many of the members of the working group agreed with this strategy and offered support. Perhaps you can imagine our surprise and disappointment when we saw in the report 2 recommendations about honors classes that Mr. Miller had labeled as non-negotiable. Had someone in the district leadership really already made the decisions about honors classes 3 months prior to the completion of the committee's work and in opposition to the beliefs of some of their colleagues on the team? What gave me hope that day is witnessing each member of this board do what I teach my students to do: ask good questions. Please continue to ask good questions and expect good answers from the leaders entrusted with guiding this great work. Salt Lake City School District stands at a crossroads with the opportunity to design a structure for accomplishing Dr. Grant's stated goal of genuinely involving stakeholders. In light of the imminent changes in shared governance, district leaders and building principals have an even greater responsibility to engage with all community members in authentic and transparent ways. We must never treat those who work to face to face to support and inspire our students every day as tangential to the process. On the contrary, the only way to achieve educational excellence is for all students to work with engaged students as a part of a collaborative team. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. All right, and that was our only speaker this evening. Diane, thank you again for joining us this evening. Up next, for those that are following us online, you'll notice that there's a new section of our agenda that board leadership has discussed with the board just briefly through some emails in an effort to not lose track of some tabled items from our previous meeting that we didn't want to leave, off of the radar, so to speak. So we've added this section. Of course, our board is governed by some rules that when an item is tabled, that a member from the prevailing side has to untable the item to either the discussion or the action agenda this evening. So the first section of this new section, so to speak, is number 1, the discussion agenda. We do not have the need to untable the first item there, which is B3, administrative procedures, but I will entertain a motion to untable items B and C of number 1 there to the respective discussion agenda.
Board President Salazar, can we also move to untable them when we reach that respective section on the agenda, so we know we're able to actually get to each item? So if we moved through reports and to discussion, we don't end up with an overlong discussion and we're able to get through each item in order?
All we're doing is moving it to the discussion agenda, so we're not going to necessarily make a decision right now. So all the motion would be that I'm asking for is to move it to either the action or the discussion agenda. Does that help with the timing element that you might be thinking about?
It does. It's just my question is, we could do it when we get to those items, correct?
We could.
Okay.
But I would also like to kind of streamline what we've presented. So if there's a motion on the table, I'll entertain it.
I'll go ahead and move to take from the table the motion to table district department reorganization and board calendar and move it to the discussion agenda.
Okay. We have a motion. Is there a second? Okay. We have a motion and a second on the table. Any discussion? All right. Seeing none, we'll take a roll call vote starting with Board Member Anderson.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
Brian Jensen, yes.
Amanda Longo, yes.
Charlotte Fife Jefferson, yes.
All right, that passes, and we will revisit those 2 items first on the discussion agenda. Same process for number 2, action agenda items A, B, and C, Core Technologies, Kick-Up Incorporated, and MGT of America Consulting.
I move to take from the table the motion to table Core Technologies, LLC, Kick-Up, Inc., and Management of American Consulting, LLC, and move it to the action agenda.
I second.
All right, got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll start with the roll call vote with myself. Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
Brian Jensen, yes.
Amanda Longo, yes.
Charlotte Fife Jefferson, yes.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
All right, that motion passes. We will revisit those when we get to those sections of the agenda. Moving on to our reports agenda, the first item there is the 2025-2026 capital projects list. B.A. Kearsley.
Thank you. As attached to the agenda, so this is the next building block in the budget process as we continue over the next couple of months to give you little pieces of the budget, so when you get the full budget in May, it's not overwhelming. So as noted in the cover letter, we have a team of our auxiliary services along with a representative, usually the principal or someone from the building. They do walkthroughs of each building and they go through and determine what needs to be on the capital projects list for next year. We actually have a 5-year list, but as we're just we're working on the next year's budget, so we're focusing this presentation on the capital projects list for next year. And we also had if you remember, we had a bond pass, and part of that bond was sustainability projects. So those are included in here, and in my cover memo, I kind of break out the piece of this that is paid for with the bond through those sustainability projects, and then the other just regular course of business items that have been presented. So again, this is just here for your review. This will be one piece of the budget when we get to the whole capital projects fund. So open to any questions.
Nate.
Oh, Amanda, sorry I missed you.
I did ask this to you before, but for the public's sake, if you could review why buildings that were closed or buildings that are older, et cetera, are on the proposed
Yes,
list to.
Absolutely. I'll start with closed. So we still own the closed buildings. We're actually still utilizing them. We have staff in them to keep them from being vacant, becoming overrun. So we want to keep them in working condition. So to do that, things still have to happen because we still own the buildings. We didn't want to shutter them and just have them sit there and become an eyesore. So we need to keep them in working condition, and that's why you'll see some of those closed buildings that, we do have projects that will happen on some of those closed buildings. Older buildings as well, I mean, we have students in them. Even our buildings that might be older still have several years of useful life, so we need to make sure that they continue to provide a safe learning environment for our students. And so you'll see all of our buildings, if there's a need, will be addressed.
Thank you. And a follow-up to that, we're obviously on the back end, well, we're going through the process of determining what we're doing with the properties that we closed. Do we have kind of a rough timeline on determining what the future use may be or what path those properties may be taking? So when we go to make the decisions for next year's budget, that is hopefully in conjunction to the other piece versus approving all this work and then we're selling it next week, so to speak. Does that make sense? Because we're going through the school closure process and the G5, it's then going through the steps of determining if we have internal use, and if we don't, there are steps that we need to determine up to and including potentially selling. So as we're gearing up for this budget discussion and these proposed items to spend a lot of money on, have we considered what our timeline is on going through that G5 closure and studying those properties for what we're going to do with them?
Yes. So at the next board meeting, our second one in March, we're going to bring to you the district needs and ask that we use current facilities for a couple of the district needs that we have, and let you know which sites we think are the best for fulfilling those needs. Once the board has decided that we're going to fulfill district needs with particular sites, then the sites that aren't used would go through a second process, which would be deciding how we use them more generally. To this point, we've made a decision as a board, and maybe it's an informal decision, not to sell properties. There's been a general agreement that these are public assets that are held by the district, and should circumstances change and we need property again in the future, we want to have this on hand. That doesn't preclude us from using them for 100 different uses. It would just mean rather than selling outright, we may just lease property, lease buildings, things like that. So all of that can be laid out in the coming months. So once the district needs are determined, the next step in that G5 process is to do an analysis of the sites that remain. And this analysis includes the real estate analysis. I've forgotten the names, Alan. Do you happen to remember the names?
And I believe we would hire a consultant to do this
Yes.
for us, a professional that has, real estate and property management and all that expertise.
So there's a fiscal analysis, kind of looking at what the value of the land would be and things like that. So it can bring that to the board for decision-making. And the other is looking at how could a property be used? And placing that question in the larger context of the community the property is in. So looking at all sorts of things. We've looked at, when we first looked at this G5 policy and trying to figure out how do you repurpose school buildings, we had shared with the board, I believe, some ideas of different ways buildings have been repurposed, either for housing, teacher housing, they've made retail out of them, community organizations use them, those sorts of things. So there's a lot of different uses that we could entertain. But part of it is just getting an overall understanding about that property and things. So that would be our next step. So once we make that determination, and we haven't scheduled that in board meetings because we're waiting for this first step to be completed, which is what are the needs of the district first for space and property? And then from there, then what do we do in the next step of moving forward? And that would include those analyses that would come to you as a board.
Can I ask one more question? So do you, this, I guess leading document is saying that we're anticipated making the budget decision on June 3rd. So for the G5 process on these buildings that have closed, do we anticipate at least getting most of the way through that to at least be informed as to how that potentially impacts our decisions regarding the budget for next year?
That's a good question, except I'm not sure what the impact, so the longer-term impacts would be if you as a board, because you essentially are the owners of these properties as a board. So if you as a board make a determination that we are going to build teacher housing or family housing on a lot, we wouldn't be investing our dollars so much. We'd be keeping the building in decent shape up till then, so that would be the cost. I imagine that Alan still has in the budgets the upkeep and maintenance in these. But then, so the longer-term cost of just keeping the buildings and the grounds in
And
good shape.
just more so, like, obviously you're saying the main approach is keeping these properties. And then we obviously want to maintain them so they don't go into
Yeah.
disheveled and it costs
Yeah.
us more money.
And we don't-
So at
I
least
don't
have an understanding
anticipate-
of what our goals are with these properties, so we can take that into consideration when we make the budget decisions in June.
Yeah, I don't anticipate that we would be spending district money to do anything to these properties beyond their basic upkeep, that you as a board are not gonna become the developers of something, that we would lease that out, partner with people to do that and that sort of thing. So we can have people who do that kind of work come and speak to the board to share more about what those processes look like and things as you're trying to decide the next steps for those properties.
Yeah, and that would be great. It was like us to be closer in that process in time for those June, for that June meeting.
Yeah, I would question whether, based on the process, we would be done and have a decision made on what we're doing with each property by,
By June?
By
I
June.
wonder that too.
Yeah, and maybe we can't, but at least if we can keep that moving forward so that we are further along in that G5 closure process, so that that can be meaningfully considered in this discussion, because obviously the budget's a huge component of what we're doing here.
That's the time.
Thank you.
Ashley?
I have a question for Alan. If there are schools that see that they have capital needs and they don't find them on this table, and they are concerned about, upkeep or maintenance of their building, what is the best avenue for them? Or how would they know, for instance, if your item is not on this year's list, but we would anticipate it to be in the next handful of years? How would you navigate
yeah,
that?
I would suggest the principal reach out to our Executive Director of Auxiliary Services, Isaac Astu.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Alan? Thank you, Alan. I appreciate the time, and we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the legislative audit discussion. For the public, as you know, the board directed Alan and Logan Hall to start the negotiations with our classified association groups like SLEA and our classified groups. And so I think we're just hearing a little brief update on where we're at right now in those negotiations and discussions.
Right, so we had an initial meeting with SLEA and our classified groups 2 weeks-ish ago. Had good conversations with them, and I'll have Mr. Logan Hall just kind of update on that process.
Yeah, essentially just what Alan said, we have initiated the negotiation process with the purpose of addressing the recommendations from the legislative audit. We've only had one preliminary meeting with each group, both our certified teachers with Salt Lake Education Association and with our classified associations. Our projected outcome, or we want to make sure that we're finished so that no matter what, if we get to a point where we make changes to the written agreement, we need to have that back to you no later than May 6th. That's the very absolute latest deadline because we cannot make changes as a result of House Bill 267 passing this year. We can't make changes after May 7th of this year. So our goal is to wrap up hopefully by April 15th to have things back to you as a board to make final approvals. But the absolute latest deadline will be May 6th. So we hope to have another report coming soon.
Any questions for Logan or Alan?
I have a question.
Ashley?
Of course.
So when our meeting started, obviously, the bill that would undo shared governance moved through Senate Tax and Rev, but none of us heard that discussion because we're all sitting here. So my question would be, if that bill passes, what would occur differently than what you've just reported to us, if anything?
I don't know if anything would be different. I think we'll have to weigh that and analyze the outcome of whatever happens with that bill before making any further decisions.
Any other questions?
I have one more.
Please.
What would be the change in relationship to all of this with the conclusion of collective bargaining as set forth by the legislature also?
So the change to,
Like what you're talking about now, what are the next steps and what would happen with the written agreement based on the new law?
based upon the new law, any contractual agreement that we have with an employee association group will be null and void after their expiration date. And so currently, our written agreement that we have with our educator group expires on June 30th of 2026. And so after that point in time, we will no longer be able to engage in collective bargaining and therefore would not be able to have a collectively bargained written agreement or associated agreement of any kind.
But so regardless of what happens with that law or this other law that is moving swiftly through the process, June 2026 would be the day in which that becomes more affected. Does that make sense?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
So the written agreement, like I said, expires on June 30th of 2026, so that would be the ultimate date. If the other bill that I don't know it exactly, but I believe it's House Bill 545 that
yeah.
addresses shared governance provisions in any written agreement with a collective bargaining group. That, if that goes into effect and becomes law, that would nullify any part of our written agreement that contains elements of shared governance.
But no other elements?
No
Okay.
other elements.
Great.
The rest of the agreement would remain intact
Thank you, that's
until
very
its
helpful.
expiration date.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Logan. Thank you, Alan. And I also want to thank Mike, Chelsea, Becky, your executive team for participating in those negotiations with us and your patience throughout this legislative season. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, moving along, we have a technology update. And Alan, do you mind introducing this one? I think Sam might be coming up.
Right. Invite Sam Quantz, our Information Systems Director, to come forward. He's going to do a presentation per board request on just some technology issues throughout the district.
Right, we'll make sure that comes up real quick. Okay, I just need to make sure it comes up on yours.
Sam doesn't have an IT guy to help him out.
Make sure the camera comes over here. Thanks for allowing me to be here with you today. Have a little trepidation, not because I don't want to present to you, it's that I'm afraid of all the sales calls that will happen tomorrow. So I already get a lot of them, but whenever we talk about technology, they seem to come out of the woodwork. So in September of '22, we presented a budget to the Board of Education to officially fund one-to-one throughout the district. Prior to 2022, we were one-to-one really at that time already because of all the computer purchases that we made during COVID. Prior to COVID, we were somewhere between one student, one device for every 2 students, to one device for every 2.5 students, somewhere between there, and it fluctuated per school. And that varied depending on the emphasis that the school put on the program, okay, on technology. And so this was a way to standardize it across the board and to provide access to all students. This is the budget that was approved and at that time. So we initially recommended we purchase about 10,400 devices right out of the gate. The reason we did that was because during the year of 21-22, we purchased 10,000 computers alone. That was just to keep up with the demand for remote learning. So our plan on this was to have a 5-year rotation of devices, and to stretch that out, we needed to buy extra devices to start replacing a few early so we could level it out over time. So, and then in years 3 through 5, we would drop those numbers down to a more accurate number of what our enrollment was. We also got approval for additional staff to help support this, as well as we looked at providing a district-wide kind of, we called it a private LTE network, so we could have internet access, or more specifically, we wanted to extend the classroom to the home, and we'll report on how that was as well. So the devices that we use are an HP ProBook X360 running Microsoft Windows, and then we do have iPads as well, particularly a one-to-one device. iPads will be a one-to-one device for a special ed student who has it written by our assistive technology team into their IEP. We have some schools that have previously purchased iPads for their younger grades, and we can talk about that in just a little bit. I want to talk about the X360. The reason we have purchased that one, we evaluated a number of devices, and this one really provided the most flexibility. We were able to get the price down to a reasonable place. It has a 360 hinge, so one of the features that we get a lot of feedback on is, they call it tent mode. So it flips over, sits on a tent, and they all have touch screens, so the students are able to function kind of like a tablet in there. So we get some good feedback on that. When we talk about cost of these devices, these are a little bit more than you would get from a standard consumer device at your local store, right? The reason that is we buy a business class model of device, as well as we purchase an additional 2 years of warranty on these devices. So we try and buy a device that is flexible to meet all of the needs of the requests that we get. And we get a lot of varying requests from schools. The iPads function very well in a very kind of specific scenario. iPads have a little bit of a limitation that they are specific to maybe the apps that they have. If you're trying to just work through the browser on some of these applications, that becomes a little cumbersome. So they really have a niche, but where we see some challenges are perhaps in testing and things like that. So we like to use the standard device for all of our grades because of the testing requirements that we have and the other factors. Okay, so over the last 3 years, the first 2 years, we purchased those 10,400 devices as we anticipated and came under budget. So we anticipated about 2.3 million for those 2 years, and we came slightly under budget. This last year, because ESSER funds were expiring, we purchased this next round of computers a little bit early. We put that in I want to say it would have been in June or July of this last year. That one was a little bit over budget. We anticipated a $1.9 million cost for 4,400 devices, but and that went up for 2 reasons. The cost of everything's going up, number one, and then number 2, we increased the memory. We doubled the memory on those devices, and the reason that is we have a push in our CTE programs to really work with the Adobe suite So Adobe Photoshop, Adobe Illustrator, and rather than having two different devices, one device here and not having a student be able to access the software at home, we decided to purchase a device that could support that application as well. So all of the other applications plus the Adobe Suite. We anticipate that cost being able to come down because of our declining enrollment. Our next order, because we purchased early, won't be until about a year from now. We won't do another student one-to-one. So we might have a little bit of a stretch on some devices. They won't be exactly 5 years. They might be a little bit older. Again, that is to try and level out the large purchases that we previously had. But because our enrollment's going down, I don't anticipate needing to buy 4,400. It'll more likely be somewhere between 4,000 and 4,200. Now, the reason we buy 4,400 or that number is when we distribute to a school, we don't just give them one device for every student. We provide 110% of their population. So that extra 10% of devices, that is to help the schools account for any enrollment growth that we're unaware of at the beginning of the year and loss or damage. What we don't want to get into is a situation where a school has 20 students move in and they don't have devices and I've got to wait 6 weeks to get them in. We want to have them ready and moving. So that's why we build that 10% in so they're just there. When we built this, we created a one-to-one school guidance. And it has, this is just one page. This is in District Document Center under Information Systems. So if you're bored one night and want to read it, feel free. But what we tried to do is build these models for schools to allow some flexibility in how they orchestrated the technology in their school. Not just, here's one device for a student, that's all you get. So we built what's called a base technology model. And we tried to really account for it based upon what it costs to support a device. In private sector, a computer technician on average supports about 150 devices. In Salt Lake District, one computer tech supports 4,000 devices or more. So, you know, when we're looking at providing, we want really good response times. I want to be able to have you put in a ticket. I want a response within 24 hours. If it's high, I want it within a few hours. Those are the type of response times that we want. But because of those sheer numbers, we have to put systems and processes in place to help us compensate for the lack of staff. Okay, I was at a conference in Redmond one time, and they had an SLA, a service level agreement, that if they were in a conference, their tech had to be there within 5 minutes. So that was their requirement. That's how serious it is out in the private sector. And so we can't get to 5 minutes. We really try. But those are factors that we're thinking about when we're thinking about good IT service. So every school receives one laptop for every student, K through whatever grade they are. Then we say you can also have up to two labs. That includes if you have a lab in the library and a lab somewhere else. And then we talk about maximums. Here's what we can support. You can have one-to-one plus 20% growth on top of that. So we said, okay, we give you 110%. You might need another 10% for some other purpose. You can figure that out, okay? And then we just give some guidance on it. Like if you choose that 10% to be iPads, if you choose them to be additional laptops, that's all in your base model, right? But you can kind of fluctuate what that is. The only difference between this base model for the middles and the high schools is the number of labs that we allow. So we allow 4 labs in the middle schools and 10 labs in the high schools. And that was to account for some of the CTE labs and things like that we have in those schools. This is an example of an application we built so schools can see what their inventory is. If you ask any of my school techs right now about inventory, they'll probably twitch because we talk about it all the time. This is a pretty significant asset that we have. So this particular school had an October 1 count of 484. We can see that they currently have 586 devices that we, through district purchases, have provided to them. This particular school hadn't purchased anything from their own funds. And then it's not a high school, so there's no CTE devices there. They have 46 iPads and 27 desktops. We have listed there, just for reference, staff counts and staff devices. We actually don't include staff devices. They're automatically grandfathered into our support model. The only time we'd have a question with that is if I see 71 staff members and 300 devices, staff devices. And we might say, why do we need 4 devices for every staff member? So if you look at that on the next line, you've got a 1-to-1 student laptop allocation. That's 110% of 484. They currently have 586 total laptops. And then when you include the iPads and the desktops that we're supporting for student support, there's 659 devices total, where their maximum number, their base allocation, is 660.8. Okay? So they're one under. A school does not have to meet their maximum. They have to meet at least their minimum, which is the 1-to-1. So anywhere in between the minimum to the maximum they can be at. And they have flexibility in kind of deciding how that looks. Currently, we have 23,525 working student laptops. As of the other day when I looked in our student information system, we have about just under 19,000 enrolled students. So we have plenty of devices for students. We try and keep track of these numbers of lost and damaged. How are they being used? So what we have marked in inventory, this does not include things we don't know about at the moment, but we have 436 devices that are within their support cycle that are lost. I can tell you that during the year between 2020, March 2020, when we closed and came back for remote, and we had to give out devices so fast, we were well over 2,500 devices that we just have no idea where they went. We would get them back from the police department or someplace years later. So the management of that device is, as far as keeping track of them, we've definitely improved. We have 345 damaged, and these are in various states of damage. They could be damaged beyond repair. They could be in technician repair and so forth, and we'll always have that, but that's why we build in that 10% so that a single damaged device does not impact the day-to-day operations. So in summary on that piece, all but one, at least all schools have at least one device per student in the laptop range. And all but 2 schools have 10% more devices than the 1 device per student. And that could be various reasons, an enrollment growth that we've had, or whatever. Schools, at the beginning of the year, if they don't feel like they have enough devices, or throughout the year, they can reach out to me and we'll evaluate that if they need more devices. We usually provide that. We look at their inventory and say, okay, we're showing you have these many devices. Do you know where they are? Let's do a quick little audit. And then we move that forward. And then most schools, when we looked at that base technology model, most schools have more than their base allocation. We have some schools that have upwards of over 200 based upon the last few years over their base allocation. So we have a lot of devices out there. This is a screen from our main curriculum application, single sign-on app called Clever. Inside of Clever, you will have a bunch of educational apps like Lexia or a link to Canvas, or iReady is another one that's there. And this shows us over the last 28 days from January 28th to February 24th, what our logins were on that. We know that these come from our devices. There are a few that logins that we can tell come from home, but the majority of this comes from our devices. 72.8% of our students that we have rostered have logged in sometime during that 28 days to use this tool. And as we look at the flow, right, very little usage on the weekends, but during every day of the week, we are somewhere up in that 8,000, 8,500 student range logging into this device. And that'll vary from school to school. This next slide shows us what applications we are using. Obviously, the top 10 login, Clever itself, they've got to log into Clever to get to the other applications. But you can see that Lexia Core 5, during that 28-day window, was our #1 used application from that system. And you can see them all being moved down from there. And that West High School was the #1 user of applications, students logging in throughout that window as well. Now, these apps that we're looking at now are applications that are connected to Clever. We use Clever as a distribution point. All of these applications are integrated in with our student data. We roster through them and so forth. What we used to do is we would build these programs that would automatically roster these individual programs, and so we were managing 20+ uploads every night. With Clever, we were allowed to consolidate that to one upload a night to Clever, and then Clever pushes that data out. So it allows us to really keep track of our student data and where it's being pushed to, which is a requirement of some of Utah law. So we also have applications that are just links, shortcuts. So the #1 shortcut that is used in Clever is Canvas. That in structure is Canvas. The #2 is our student portal, okay? So you can look at that number of unique users, 4,889. You can say, well, that's not very many people using Canvas. That's because we have alternate ways of accessing Canvas. They do not have to just use Clever. They could go through, they have links on the website, we have links on our desktops. It's all over. That's why I added this bottom slide of Canvas uses, just to show you. We have about 5,000 students accessing it through Clever, but overall we've had 14,000 in that 28-day period that have engaged in using Canvas. I put in a week period just through February 17th through 21st, just to kind of show you what it looks like at a little shorter period and more recent period. We had 11.6 thousand unique students use Canvas or Clever. And Lexia Core 5 is still our #1 application, but this time Glendale was the #1 school for that week. And that'll flex, yeah. Go Glendale. That's right. Okay. I want to talk about purchases. Now, you'll see, because this has been a question that's come up over the course of this year, and it really is about understanding what we have. We have the one-to-one purchases, and that'll happen once a year. We've shown that that's happened once a year. We have teacher devices. Those actually, I hope, are on I think we're on the consent agenda tonight. We have a grant that is purchased for that. So we have teacher laptops that we buy, and we replace 20% a year for every 5 years. So we can keep the teachers having adequate devices. And then we have everything else. Previous to this year, schools had their capital outlay funds distributed to them. Last year, we decided to consolidate that. And so what we've been going through is looking at all of the places where needs have been unmet over the last few years. We're seeing devices that are 8, 9, 10 years old that have needed to be replaced. So we've been trying to level that out. These are office machines, district office staff, auxiliary staff, everywhere we're looking at and buying that. Because it's consolidating, you're seeing me put in one big order instead of 15 separate little orders that would not have come to your attention before because they're over. So that's what you've been seeing. Over the last few months, you've been seeing me spend almost $1 million in just keeping our staff devices, bringing them up to speed. Okay, our software approval process. Currently, we have 407 pieces of software that are approved in the district. There is a Utah law called the Utah Student Privacy, I always get it backwards, so I gotta make sure I get it in my head. Utah Student Privacy and Data Protection Act. That says that any piece of software that contains student data, we must have a contract with, and they must meet these requirements. So for example, they can't use targeted advertising. If the software uses targeted advertising, I'm sorry, we can't use it. Because that's what the law says. So we have an application that teachers and staff can put an application in, it gets reviewed. Contrary to popular opinion, it's not just all IT that reviews this. I review it for the data privacy and system compatibility. For actual curriculum propriety, I go and meet with teaching and learning. I say, we have these applications. Do these meet with the direction that you have? For example, we had a a piece of math software that a school wanted to use. And we use, as our district curriculum, we use Great Minds, or Eureka Math through Great Minds. And so I reached out to Holly McIntosh and said, Holly, the school wants to use this. Does that meet in line? She was like, let me check on that. She went and visited with the principal, discovered how it would be used as a supplement, not a supplant, to that other piece of software. And so we approved that one through. The other day, I had a piece of software that was submitted by a CTE teacher, and in it, it had some wording in their privacy policy that made it look like they might do targeted advertising. And the piece of software was an industry standard piece of software for programming. So we know it's there and we have this wrestle. So what I did is I reached out to the teacher and I said, hey, here's our challenge here. We have this other piece of software that we use internally in our programming department that conceptually is the same thing. We're willing to set this up for you so you could use this instead. And the teacher's investigating and thinking about that. So we use these processes to discuss these requests that come in. So everything that you see is denied here are denied for a reason, right? So 43 of those denials they were just duplicates, right? I had 3 people ask for the same piece of software. 63 we had denied for either data privacy concerns, they didn't want to complete our data protection agreement, or it was some sort of unsupported software. So there's some software out there that doesn't work with Clever, for example. And so if it doesn't work with Clever to be rostered, we look at the cost to support it and then to roster it. If it's too much, then we might say, we need it to work with Clever, so we're not building these other systems to do that. Additional IT staff. We hired all the IT staff that was approved, and we actually decided that we were okay to downsize a little bit based upon our structures. So the systems we use, one of the reasons we use the Microsoft system from an IT side is the management. You will not find a better management tool out in the world for that. Every organization will use, many organizations use this. So we had someone get promoted and another one leave, and so we decided we would leave with 16 techs instead of 17. These are just out in the schools, just to kind of show you what we're doing with our staff. And then the private CBRS. Previously we called it LTE, but really the signal was a CB radio signal. So we have different spectrum of where the signal will function. We can buy licenses in the CB radio spectrum. In the LTE spectrum, that's where T-Mobile, AT&T, they all operate. Getting spectrum in that range is very expensive and very hard. So we didn't have that capability. So in the Glendale area, we built this essentially wireless network that stretched all through that quadrant. So you think about Riley, Parkview, Franklin, we had that whole section covered with this signal. And what we found is it did not penetrate homes. And we worked with the Utah Education and Technology Network on this. They have some spectrum engineers that have specialized tools to help us with this. And when they got to the point of, well, you might need to try and put a booster in this apartment complex, we were like, okay, this is probably a little too much for us to manage. And we decided to pull the plug on that project, that it just would not work for us without going to that next level of spectrum. So we abandoned that project. Previously during one-to-one, we dealt with student hotspots. We had about 1,500 at our max. We never gave out a full 1,500. The foundation also had Internet Essential vouchers for Comcast, and we've used a few of those. Over the last few years, we've decreased the number of hotspots from 1,500 down to 200, just based upon the demand. We haven't even had a demand from schools for 200 based upon the requests that we have. So we've just kind of been managing that. If we had a higher demand, we might buy more, but we've just, rather than paying for devices that aren't being used, we've just shrunk that down. All right, any questions?
Charlotte?
So I have a question about, do you have some programs, or are all of the applications that, used district-wide, or are some only used at a school, like at a site-based?
Yeah, we have both.
Both?
Yep. So we have our main infrastructure applications and curriculum applications that are used district-wide. If a school has chosen to purchase a piece of software and it can be approved and it passes all the checks, we allow them to use it.
Okay. Do you have a process by which you determine what the district-wide applications are? And is this just going on year-round, like as the requests come in?
All the time.
Okay.
Right. Dr. Hall and I visited the other day about how we can streamline that process. Sometimes we get an application in and you can tell that someone didn't quite understand the question in the form, what we were looking for, and we're like, okay, how can we make this better and be more meaningful? So we visit all the time. When we were, if I'll address kind of like Microsoft, we get that question all the time. Why are you Microsoft versus Google? When we when the Digital Teaching and Learning Grant came out about 10 years ago, that was first on the horizon. The way that we worked through that is I met with, at the time, the curriculum department. Mr. Logan Hall was on that department then, and we talked with some of the ed tech coaches at that time, and we said, hey, what do we want our plan to be? And part of that plan was settling in on, we knew we wanted to move closer to one-to-one, get better at stabilizing what our direction would be. And based upon the feedback that we had been receiving from schools at that time and their recommendations from a curriculum standpoint, Google was only somewhat being used in schools at that time. You had some that were starting to breach it. A lot of schools in 2015 there were very few that were one-to-one. They were just on the cusp of making those decisions. So there are some schools that were, but in general across the state, we didn't really have any. So at that time, based upon those recommendations, we made that decision to invest that our main structure would be Microsoft. And we've kind of moved forward with that ever since. But we do try and get feedback. So one of the questions that I have right now that I'm trying to work on is smart boards. We have various degrees of projection software all over the district. And we look at these smart boards, which are a relatively expensive asset, technology, right? And we've estimated that only about 30% of our teachers actually use their full capability. The rest are primarily using it for a projection surface. So, and some will touch it still, but they're not using all the full capabilities. So we're really asking the question, is this technology what we want to going forward? So we sent out a survey back in December to get feedback from teachers about, do you want smart boards? Do you want to work with interactive or untethered teaching? That's one that's out there that's been in a lot of schools. Do we want to buy this? So we're getting that feedback. We're going to be, I'm bringing some devices into my office. We're going to have some open houses in the next couple of weeks as soon as I can get them for people to come in and say, yes, this device will work for us. So we try and make those decisions collaboratively.
Thanks, Charlotte. Brian?
Okay, just a second here. Okay, so I want to make sure that I'm just understanding correctly. You were explaining that we're now like in the 3 to 5 year period. Well, we're like in the 5-year period.
Yeah, this
Okay.
this is year 3 of
Yeah,
the
okay.
5-year period. Yep.
So in that, on the slide, it said 1,971,000.
Yep.
Okay, but then what we really spent was 2,050,000.
Right.
Is that okay?
That's correct.
So when I'm looking at all of those things on the consent agenda, and like you referred to one that was on there today, like $230,000, is that a part of that 2,050,000?
No, that is the teacher laptop replacement purchase that I spoke about.
Right, okay, so how does that's what I thought, but how do we get like a full picture of what we're spending on technology.
On technology, yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yep. So again, I tried to break that out. Like, right now, we're spending about $2 million on student devices. We're spending about a little over $200,000 on teacher devices. And so far, we've spent about $1 million on everything else.
Okay, so back to that slide. If I add all of those things together, then
you get, that's our total.
That's what we're spending on technology.
Yep.
Okay, so you brought up smart boards. That was one of my questions. Where do smart boards fall in?
They're going to come out of this other budget, so.
Okay, they're the other part.
We've got this capital outlay budget. We have not spent it all, so hold on to your seats. I'm going to be spending more because we need it, right? If we look at smart boards alone, we put them in when they were big or we had some one-time funds, but throughout the district, they're over 10 years old. We have a couple of schools that have paid to replace them over the years, like 2 schools. The rest of them that have smart boards are all 10 years old. So we're going to have to strategically make a plan to replace these. That's why I'm asking that question. Do we really want to spend $3,000 for a board, or do we want to reduce that? Is there a better model that gives us the bang for our buck? So there will be more.
Okay, so I appreciate your talking about that. I'm now reflecting back when I was in the classroom, and I'm glad that you're asking the teachers about, whether they want them. One of the challenges, and I am the first to admit to anyone that my children always say, he's technologically challenged, but I think that there are lots of teachers out there that, and maybe I'm being too general, but would say, okay, we just figure out how to use this device, and then this other device comes along, and that can be overwhelming too. I mean, with younger teachers that are really tech savvy on all of that sort of stuff, they're going, oh yeah, use that, use that. I'm just trying to say I don't think I'm the only teacher.
No. That's exactly why I'm a proponent of standardization across the board. When we really are an organization that will rival large businesses as far as technology is concerned. If you look at the complexity of what we do, of the number of sites that we have, and the way we have to secure them and manage them, we are as large as any, some Fortune 500 companies in the number of employees and students that we have. So it takes a lot. And so standardization actually helps us to manage that. It also helps us to go deep in our professional development. If you have every teacher or every classroom have their own piece of software, or even every school, then you run into challenges, right? Collaboration breaks down.
Yeah.
We actually saw that when we, a few years ago, we had 2 schools that qualified for an Apple grant. And we did that as a pilot. Let's say, okay, let's look at this and see how it works. So we had Glendale and Mary W. Jackson. And those schools loved it. And it was great. And they were working well. Where that broke down is when we started to collaborate outside those schools, right? And that's where we saw the problem of non-standardization. So I think what you're talking about is if we can standardize on these tools, and I'm not saying we don't limit innovation in the classroom.
Right.
I'm saying here's our baseline. If we have that baseline, then we can assign the resources to make sure that teachers and students are able to use the technology for their learning.
Okay, thank you. I mean, that makes me feel better. I do have a couple of other questions, and I have a little bit of time. So we were talking about those iPads, or I guess what my question is, how many of them are going home now? I know that there were a lot of them that were going home, of course, during COVID, but are they still going home?
So iPads, we're not sending home.
Okay.
Generally, where we have those pockets, we use iPads again with our special education students, where it just is the better device for them. We have some schools like Newman that kind of invested in a little bit more of a structure at that time. They had a grant.
We had that iPad grant.
Right. And then we have individual schools that have purchased. iPads are an interesting conversation because I've posed this question over the years to our teaching learning department, even as recent as school administrators at the last Admin Institute. We have a conversation of whether or not these laptops are right for our young learners, right? So for K2. And this conversation comes out. I've seen other districts where they do iPads for K2. So I've asked that question. Do we use iPads for K2? I can get behind that. I can support that and see that. But the response that I've received from the schools and the people that I've talked to is not really committing. Yeah, I can see that, but nobody wants to say, yes, we should go that way. And the reason that is because some of the limitations of the iPad. Again, it's very specific. If you've got the app for it, it's great. If you're just browsing or something like that, it's great. But if you're using it for testing, maybe not so great, right?
Okay, you're getting to my, because when I was in the classroom, we were having to use it for testing because of all of the stuff that was going on, and it was
not fun.
A nightmare.
Yeah, not fun.
Okay, so you're looking at all of those sorts of things.
Yep.
Okay, then I guess my last one, how are we handling like student-parent responsibility? Because you talked about, you know, like 500 of them are lost and another 500 of them are damaged. Back when I was in the classroom, there was a paper that, you know, that parents were signing with their students or whatever, that they would accept responsibility.
Yep.
Are we doing that?
Yeah, that happens actually during school registration. It's
Okay.
part of that. It talks about how much the device costs and you may be charged for it. What we look at it for these assets is like, we just don't want throwaway devices, right?
Yeah.
The throwaway devices that you buy, you know, kind of at the consumer lower price level, that, if that's what you want, that's what you get, right? You get that quality of a device. So we try and help schools to manage the checkout, check-in process, monitoring. Do we have room to grow? Absolutely. But I think we are getting much, much better.
Okay, final question. Is there a way on those devices that they can be tracked so that if they did get lost, you would have a way to, you know, go, oh, you know what, it's over here?
Yeah, yes and no.
Okay.
Yes and no. If the device is connected to a network, we can kind of see where it is. But if it's turned off,
Okay.
they're not built with RFI chips that are constantly on. So, or we don't have that. We could add that, but that would be an additional cost, so.
Thanks, Brian. Ashley?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. The first is that you identified high usage, but could you present what schools or apps and software have low usage?
Yes, yeah. That was just a screenshot of, you know, what the top 10 were, but we can go down and drill down into all those schools.
Okay, the reason that I ask is that sometimes I hear from schools or teachers that they limit the device use because they don't want students to incur those repair or replacement costs you're talking about. So one trade-off of not using a device that you're saying is a throwaway device, when the device is a throwaway device, people don't hesitate to send it home with students. And I think one thing that happens in our district is some schools are choosing not to use these devices because they don't want students to incur the cost if they lose the device or break the device. And it's creating some inequity in our secondary offerings. So I would be curious to know, like, does that play out in low usage?
Yeah.
If you
yeah.
can provide that.
Yeah, that would look, and we kind of looked at what they are. So in our secondary schools, all of them send devices home except for 2 of our middle schools. One has expressed what you just expressed, and we talked to them about that. The other one is choosing not to do it because they really have low homework usage. They don't feel like it's a need at that point.
Right, that makes sense to me. Another thing that I'm wondering about is could we in the future have a presentation that looks at offerings from comparable districts? And the reason why I ask is that you mentioned you talked with Ed Tech about the decision to use Microsoft rather than Google. And I think in past meetings, part of this ask for this report was some options for modifying or providing alternatives for what we do now that might be at a lower cost or that might be more user-friendly for young children, as you've referenced. And I'm wondering if we had these Apple grants that worked in school and the problem was it wasn't standardized, I'm wondering why we wouldn't have pursued making that the standard as it is in Canyons or making Google the standard as it is in Granite if there are some benefits to those approaches. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, I think those are all valid points. We have looked at what other districts do. A good portion of my staff actually lives outside the districts, and so we're able to see the quality of the devices that are being sent home, and we compare all the time. So we're looking at that. I think the question on iPads, however, is the challenge we have with testing, right?
Oh, I see.
Not just that, I think it's a fine device. It's not that. It's what we have with this requirement of testing. If we could get rid of testing, then maybe it'd be okay, but I'm not promoting that.
You're getting applause. I have one last question, which is about some experiences and some faculty comments. I know sometimes the devices do not always work effectively. Like I was leading a program after school. It took almost 45 minutes for about 9 kids to be logged on and stay logged on. And I'm wondering, when something like that happens, but then we hear a presentation, you know, it's like everything's going great. What happens when there are significant issues with devices in a classroom or significant staff complaints? Like in secondary school, we don't have student monitoring, which a lot of districts offer, where they can monitor the students' screens and get them out of what they're not supposed to be in, not just because it's an illegal website or whatever. So if complaints like that happen, what is the procedure?
Okay, so if anybody has a problem that seems insurmountable, they just need to contact me, right? Every school has a tech, so they should work with their tech first, put in a ticket, see if we can resolve what the problem is. If it doesn't seem to be getting resolved, please escalate that up to me. But hot off the presses, brand new, we are actually in the process of implementing a classroom management software right now that just came out with the Digital Teaching and Learning Grant. We went through an evaluation process of the offerings they have, and we are right now, we actually are deploying it we're deploying the inventory piece of it to devices as we speak, and we'll be testing the computer management and rolling that out within the next few weeks.
That's very exciting. Knowing that that's a response to one of the things, but those problems may still continue to come up, what could we expect by way of, we're not gonna have expenses till February 2026, you said. So any sort of modification to what we do now is not gonna come until about a year from now. So what would you recommend as the best next steps for us to hear about technology and consider what alternatives we may have as we proceed with one-to-one in the next year?
Anyone that wants to have that conversation can feel free to have their admin contact me. They can reach me directly and we can have those conversations. When we're looking at like Google, for example, if someone was to request Google today, I want to use Google Drive or I want to use Google Classroom, that would probably get denied because it's not compatible with our current setup, right? But if they want to go beyond just that initial process, they can reach out to me anytime.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Sam?
Yes.
Amanda?
Here, some of these were already asked. So you said that schools typically hang on to excess of 10% of what they need. And whenever I'm typing in my numbers, you got on here that there's about, 23,525 laptops.
Amanda, do you mind speaking into the microphone?
Sorry.
Sorry.
Turn it. Try this again. Okay. So you were talking about how schools hang on to at least 10% more of the laptops than they actually need. And then we have 23,525 laptops in inventory, but we have a 19,000-ish students. So our excess inventory district-wide is almost 20%. So we have an excess of around 4,500 laptops is my rough math, which is basically a quarter of our student body. Obviously, the purchasing, you stay up on rotating out things so we don't fall behind and have a larger issue at hand. I guess my big question is, if we've only lost or had damage approximately 800 units, that would bring us, like, let's say magically 800 disappeared, 3,900 we're still. Why do you feel that you need to be purchasing more in about a year when we've already got a large inventory and they're decreasing in size?
Right, great question. So our goal with that one is to stabilize our inventory. We had, like I said, in 2021, we had that huge increase of purchase. all throughout that time. And so we have a surplus now because of that. As we get through this 5-year rotation, we want to keep our devices as good as possible. When we go beyond 5 years, we start to see performance issues. And so our goal will be to just replace 20% of our devices every year. So you'll see that, and so all of our devices will be, within that 5-year range.
Okay, so that we're not moving past that 5-year period and they become problematic. Gotcha. And I think you basically answered my other question, but I'll ask it anyway. When you replace for different technology, how do you phase out the already purchased items? That was when you were kind of talking about smart boards, but I think it's still relevant because if we're going to be adjusting what is being used, we don't want to just, well, we spent millions of dollars on X, but Y is now shiny and new and fun. So how do you typically not waste the purchase of prior items?
Absolutely. Again, that's a piece of our standardization. We just had the USET conference at the Salt Palace last week, and part of my when I go there, I look to see what requests I'm going to get the next day for software, right? So what do we anticipate that is new and shiny, and how do we integrate that in? And so we definitely try and be very fiscally responsible to commit to at least a 5-year window on something. Some devices will be a 10-year window, like a smart board or even a projector don't necessarily need to have that 5-year window. It can be stretched out to 8 to 10 years. So we'll replace them on those cycles.
I think those were my questions. Thank you.
Sam, I just have one question for you in regards to the hotspots. I know that was like a big thing, previously during COVID, and knowing that we have like a little stockpile, are those, like, what would that stockpile be used for? Is it used for students in the classroom, or could it be used for other things that we might have going on in the district related to, I don't know, if the CLC is running a workshop with parents, or if there's tutoring needs, or if our students experiencing homelessness might need a hotspot for internet access to do homework, for example. Could those exceptions be made for those
All
devices?
of that. So,
Okay.
and I think our only differentiation when we're dealing with hotspots is we're not in the business of just providing free internet access. We're not an ISP, right? Our goal is to extend the classroom home. That's what we're trying to do. So definitely, we had a situation the other day where we did have a student that was homeless, that needed it. We worked through that process. We're providing that.
That's awesome.
We use it for teachers that are going to conferences and might have trouble with Wi-Fi in the airport. So we check them out for that time period and come back. It's all about the flexibility of our environment.
Perfect. Thank you, Sam.
Yep.
Are there any other questions for Sam?
I
You start
do.
round 2 with you, Sharon.
Okay. I'm just wondering how, if your team has thought about ways that we can reduce, I feel like I'm Doge or something, waste. I mean, how we can leverage our budget and get the programs that are or applications that are popular across the district. If it's a district-wide application, is that cheaper than having to buy various ones, or,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, yes.
So that standardization
Yep.
is one piece, right?
Yep, I'm happy to take that on. We've done that with a couple of products out there when we've had a group of schools. I've taken care of the purchase of it, and then we've built a school or something like that. Because the economies of scale obviously brings down the cost, usually, when we have more students licenses. One of the challenges that we had with this classroom management is we had a couple products that schools like to use, but I didn't have it in my budget to buy it district-wide. It was pretty expensive. Schools sometimes bought it with their discretionary budget.
Yeah.
And so that's why when this opportunity came through, we jumped on it.
So if there are teachers or admin who are wanting to use a different program, and maybe they can talk to you about what the standard
Yep.
app, I mean, obviously I'm showing my, okay, program, I don't know if it's a
Yeah,
program
yeah.
or an app, whatever.
Yep.
But, okay,
Yep, any school that has a question can reach out to me anytime.
okay.
Any other questions for Sam? Thank you, Sam,
Okay,
for joining us
thank you.
this evening and for all. Oh, one last question.
Okay, I wanted to just follow up on a question that Ashley asked, and that was, you have instances where, well, your experience, you were trying to get them on, and you were having real difficulty. Is there a way that you're monitoring across the district to see if this is something that's problematic throughout the schools?
Yeah.
So, like iReady, back when I was in the classroom, it was hard getting all of the students on. And then by the time you get them all on, the time's up. So I'm just wondering if there's a way that you have of saying, oh yeah, this is challenging across the board, or is this school, you know, maybe their internet's not great, or I'm just wondering how you address that.
Yeah, so we do have monitoring tools, and we look at it. We can't do every little thing, right? Like in your scenario, in this scenario that was presented, I would love to know more about the situation. Was it the first time the students were logging in on these devices? What happens when you first log in a device is it creates a profile on the machine, and it can take a little bit of time. It shouldn't take an inordinate amount of time, but once a profile is created, you can log in just fine. And that's the challenge sometimes with shared devices, because if I go to this computer today and that computer tomorrow, this one has my profile, but this doesn't.
Right.
And so anytime anybody experiences what Board Member Anderson experienced or you experienced, please reach out to me. I want to know about that. Our goal is high performance across the board. We deal with things like, we'll use kindergarten students and passwords, right?
Oh, yeah, I mean,
That's
I know all that.
That's that's a cyclical conversation, right? A challenging one. We know that passwords are kind of the foundation for security with personal devices, right? We look at other options, right? You've got biometrics, you've got PIN codes,
Pictures.
you've got these type of things. But when you do those things, those are localized to that one device, right? So you might make it easier on this one device, but then if the student goes home or goes to the lab, they have no idea what their username and password is to get in. So you now have introduced this other challenge. And so it's quite this balance of trying to figure out what is the best solution, right? As well as trying to protect the data of these students, right? Kindergarten and up have access to their student portal and their parent portal. And we want to make sure that the passwords and the authorization that we use protects that offsite.
Thank you.
Sorry, this made me want to offer one suggestion, which is the experience I had was also students telling me about the difficulty they were having. I was just watching, observing, right? So I think the one thing that I think is most important as we evaluate these is schools sometimes have a real scarcity mindset of like, don't take our computers, like we really want to keep them. And so if you ask adults about the problems they're having, sometimes the idea that there is scarcity results in a modified answer. But if you ask the students, they may say something like, quote, Ashley, these computers are buns, end quote. So I would suggest asking the students about their experiences using the materials rather than only the adults, because we put them in an uncomfortable position in not knowing the end game of what's happening with those devices. But
Yep.
kids will tell you the truth.
Yes, and I agree with that. We put out some surveys, as well as a couple of years ago, I met with student body councils at the high schools to get their opinions, so great feedback.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, before we move on into the agenda, I just want to remind the public and the board that we do have a time-certain public comment on our school fees at 7:15. So no matter where we're at on the next agenda item, We'll go ahead and take a pause to see if there's anybody here from the community or from our employees that are with us this evening that would like to make a public comment there. Moving on to our discussion agenda, the first item, which was moved off of the tabled section, is our district department reorganization. Superintendent?
Thanks. Nothing has changed in the presentation since we talked about this before, so I think this is just time for the board to discuss or to ask questions related to that reorganization.
I would like to make a motion to approve the district department reorganization.
We have a motion on the table.
Second.
Point of order, it would have to be first moved to action, and we would have to discuss the motion on discussion before moving it to action. We can't vote to approve it in this way.
Thank you. Ashley, I'll accept the point of order. Amanda, would you like to reframe your motion?
Sure. I make a motion to move it to discussion. Was that the
Action
action?
agenda.
Thank you. I'll reframe it as many times as you need. We can get there. Let's just get it there.
We have a motion and a second on the table. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, sure. I think that it's alarming we would limit the amount of discussion because we've only talked about this as a board for 48 total minutes. And if you think about the fact we're talking about reorganizing a machine valued at $350 million, that's $7,291,667 a minute that we spent on the topic. So to move it to action without even a second hearing on discussion would be a bit too hasty for me.
Thank you, Ashley. Any other comments or questions, discussion items? Amanda?
So I respect everything that Ashley's saying. I just feel like Dr. Grant has put a lot of thought into this and with her cabinet, and I don't think that that has been properly considered. And I feel like it's negligent that we continue to postpone this decision and not let the district get moving under the proposed org chart so the wheels can get churning. And if there are any problem areas, they can always be reassessed. And if there's specific areas like the assessments piece that we had been conversed about, we could always request that those are presented to the board annually or more often than not. But continuing to not make this decision is more harmful than good at this point.
Thank you, Amanda. Any other comments in the discussion?
Just as a response to that, I'd offer this is out of pace with what every neighboring district in our state does of a reorganization of this magnitude.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and, Charlotte, do you have one?
Well, I just wanted to say that I'm happy to have a discussion here tonight, especially if one of our fellow board members feels that's important.
That's kind of what we're doing now, but.
Oh, okay.
We also have another opportunity once we finish this vote, it either passes to move to action or it doesn't. So if you have things that you want to discuss, this would be the best time to do that. Or we can, yeah, discuss.
So Nate, could you clarify? I think you can discuss on action is
Absolutely.
what you were saying.
Yes, but I was just forecasting if the
Yeah.
motion doesn't pass per se, then this would be our first opportunity to do that.
So we either move it to action and discuss it further there, or we stop it here and continue discussion here before we consider moving it to action to discuss it again at action.
Well, not necessarily, we just, because of your motion, we're gonna vote on it one way or the other, which if it passes, we would continue the discussion, obviously, and if it doesn't, then we'd have to revisit that at a later time. Does that make sense?
Well, and I guess my question is, I know that, Ashley feels very passionate about her side, and I don't discount any of it, but does anybody else have anything else you need addressed that we need to address? Because I'm not hearing anything from anybody else, so.
I guess I have a question.
Please.
I think at our last meeting, you said that you had talked to your cabinet, but not necessarily, the other employees in those.
Those hierarchies.
Yeah. And I'm just wondering if there has been further discussion at all, what you're feeling with the staff, district staff?
So I talked with cabinet, I've also talked with some of those who would have some different moves
Oh, yeah.
within the organization. Not everybody who was included in a change in the organization. I haven't talked to everybody that way. I have not heard concerns from staff. I've not heard concerns from leadership, the cabinet, since that proposal went out. So I'm assuming that there aren't those concerns.
And to go along with that, just for
Amanda, real
others,
quick.
sorry.
Brian, have your hand up, and then we'll make sure everybody has a chance first. Thank you. Brian, go ahead.
Okay, Dr. Grant, the one thing that I was anxious about in our discussion about this previously, we had gotten right to where Sam was going to come up, and he was going to talk to us a little bit about that assessment piece that's in his department, but then it also appears that there's assessment over in another area and how those two interact. To me, that would be beneficial because I had anticipated that we would have that discourse in the previous meeting.
So assessment and evaluation, and I think if now's an appropriate time, it would be great to hear from Dr. Hall and from Sam about how that's going, and what the reasoning was before putting the organization, splitting up assessment and evaluation into two different pieces. And what the upsides of that have been and the possible downsides. Do you mind all doing this on the fly? I know we haven't talked about this for a little while.
And Dr.
Oh,
Grant, Sam
we're at
and Tiffany,
7:15?
we're at 7:15
Oh.
according to the clocks in the room, and I think we should take a pause and we'll pick this back up after the time certain public comment. Is there anybody from the community here that would like to speak to our fee schedule, our student fees schedule? We heard a presentation from Alan in our previous meeting about the fee schedule, some of the potential changes, some of the reasoning behind those, and this is your first of two opportunities this evening. There'll be a subsequent meeting where we have the same, time certain public comment period. So this is your chance, community, and even staff. I know staff members have spoken to our fee schedule in the past as well. And just to note that our same 3 minutes will apply to your comments this evening for the duration of your comment. All right, seeing none, we will go ahead and revisit. I guess Sam and Dr. Hall, if you wanted to join us.
Nate, really quickly, can I just comment on something?
Sure.
I just wanted to kind of comment off of what Dr. Grant had made a comment to that I forgot to mention. But I do want to point out that I reached out to SLCSD, I reached out to SLEA, I reached out to principals specifically as well to get feedback on the reorg chart, like an intentional reach out to say, if you have any concerns or positives, please make me aware. And other than one individual that we all got emailed on, there was no longing to put a halt to it. So it was basically this is fine. So that's kind of also where I stand with moving forward as well. But I'm absolutely
Thank you.
support the coming together with this information that's been asked.
Okay. And does the board want to hear from Sam and Dr. Hall on this one? I know, Brian, you have a strong desire to do that. So.
Yeah.
Okay. Seeing some head nods. Dr. Hall and Sam and Brian, do you want to go ahead and direct your questions, and we'll go on from there?
Well, okay. I guess my question is, how do you interact together? Because we now have it in two different areas. And, I mean, I don't recall the exact conversation, from a month ago.
When we
But
talked.
I thought that we were getting to where we could hear what you are doing, Sam, in your department in regards to the actual, I guess, creative or accommodating the actual assessments or whatever. And if I'm understanding correctly, Dr. Hall, are you then evaluating what the assessment results are? I just want to know how this works.
Okay, I'll start. So assessment and evaluation have been in teaching and learning.
Right.
And when, I still remember a day and a time when part of assessment included sharpening 700 pencils to send out with the test packets, right? Partly because the pencil sharpener was outside my office. And in the period of time over the last 5 to 7 years, the assessments have moved to almost exclusively with one or maybe some other small sections of giving to being given electronically. And therefore, the entire way that assessment, the rostering of students, you remember this, everything is on the computer, classes have to be in place, we have to have names exactly right, they have to match the record that the state has as well as the record that the school has. And then we have to make sure that the assessments are open, that the internet is working, that all of those pieces are coming together. And we had, and I heard through a variety of people in that department, that it was very difficult for the people in assessment who were working kind of face-to-face with the teachers, with the students, assisting with that, or helping our testing team. We have a team of trained testers that assist in some of the tests, that being not on the IT side of the house did not allow them to make some of the, or to provide some of the support that schools really needed. And it was really specific to the kinds of work that they were doing, but also the things that happened in IT. And this is where Sam will insert a lot of things around data privacy and making sure that we have appropriate controls over all of the things that happen on that side. And so in looking at that shift from kind of paper and pencil to thinking about how assessments being given online and dealing with that side of making sure that student data was entered correctly and is treated appropriately, it made sense to say that team should be in information systems and under SAMQuants, because that would enable them to have more of the permissions or the controls. Am I saying the right words? I keep looking at you for making sure I'm saying the right things, because this is not my house. But that would allow them to be a better support to schools. At the same time, the evaluation and data insights side of the house, the individuals that we have that look at the data, that create the dashboards, that provide a lot of the interpretation of that data, that is really a school leadership and performance function. And so that decision of, where do we put the team that helps, you all know that I'm kind of a visual person, and Sam always talks about, Mr. Quantz always talks about, the big data block, right? The great big, and so anything that goes into the big data block, right? The big data block in the sky. So that's all of our demographic data, that's all of our attendance data, that's all of our test assessment data. All of that data goes up and becomes clean and shiny. And then it goes to the evaluation team, and then they do their work with it. So those two sets of people are not connected at the hip. They have two different functions. One puts it in, one takes it out and does things with it. And so it isn't necessary for them to be a joint operation. And in fact, it is more efficient and effective for the side that goes in to live with the department that has the oversight of putting everything in. Have I put this in a kindergarten level? Okay. And then those people who take it out and do those things with it, and then communicate that Yes, with my team, absolutely, definitely with my team, but also with principals, also with area directors. The very name of the department, School Leadership and Performance, speaks to this is where we oversee or we look at the performance of schools, and that data is then shared with us. And so that was some of the thinking as we looked at how that connection would happen between actually leaving my department and then moving to Mr. Quantz and Dr. Taylor to their departments. Now, at this time, as we are looking at our assessment team, who are certificated, I am doing their ECAPs. I'm sharing 2 of them with Dr. Chelsea Maloof. So we are taking care of it that way while we wait for the reorganization to be approved so that we can rehire a supervisor of evaluation and assessment, or assessment and evaluation, so that that person could then take that over as a joint person who would report to Dr. Taylor, but then assist with that piece of their work in Mr. Quantz's department.
Okay, I appreciate that explanation. The reason that I'm asking this is, okay, teacher hat on, and I think that there's anxiety when it comes to assessment and evaluation with teachers, because there's the part where you're really trying to teach and give instruction, and then the amount of time that it takes to do all of the assessment and then to evaluate the data. And I think that teachers are anxious to just make sure that there's this balance of, okay, I'm able to do instruction and not all of the time in assessment. So I guess one of my questions would be, and I've been in this situation where you're in the computer lab or whatever, and you've got all the kids on, and everything's going great, and then you get to a question and there's not a correct answer. And you have a child raising their hand saying, Mr. Jensen, there's not a correct answer. And so I go over and I look, and there's not a correct answer. So who is it that is your team over in your department? Are they creating the questions and then he's getting the questions in? Do you see what I'm saying? How do we make sure that the assessments have been vetted or whatever, and
Sure.
that we're going to be able to do the test and get the results we want?
I think a great response to that is it depends. It depends on the source of the test. So every assessment that comes from USBE, for example, we don't have any control over. What we work with USBE is the rostering through our nightly uploads to USBE, making sure that all the connections between teachers and students are correct. The other benefit to this is we do have our own internal assessment system that we build as well. And those questions do come from and are vetted by teaching and learning, as well as those who are in assessment. We have a dual set of eyes on those to help ensure that what you're talking about doesn't happen on the assessments that we control.
Okay, so just as a follow-up to that, I think I know what you're talking about there. I mean, back when I was doing it, it was moving from SAGE to RISE and all of that.
Yep.
Okay, I can give you a specific example of a SAGE question that was wrong, and I get that that's, from another entity or whatever. But I can also give you examples of an interim that my understanding was coming from, we were building as a district or whatever, building that interim, and there was a question there that was wrong. So I'm just trying to make sure that with this breakup, that we're going to have whatever discourse we need
Absolutely.
to ensure accurate assessments.
If there was, and sometimes, if we have created an assessment, we also field test them. So in addition to having multiple sets of eyes look at them through teaching and learning, having eyes look at them through assessment as the questions go in, having people take those multiple times. We often also will ask a group of teachers or a small group of teachers to field test that assessment to look for that very issue. But if a teacher were to find a question that didn't have a right answer, then they would report that. If it was a math test, that would go to Holly McIntosh. If that were an ELA test, that would go to Chelsea Maloof. If it was a science test, it would go to Candace Penrod. If they are ones that we have created in district, that's where that would go. There's also another level of assessment where schools and departments or grade levels are creating their own formative assessments, their common formative assessments, CFAs. And if they are creating those, perhaps, and uploading them into Illuminate, I wouldn't know what those are because the control level would be the school or the department or the grade. So, it all just stems back to who writes that. And so if there is a question that doesn't have a correct answer, we would look at that to make sure first, it's a good question, it's a question that has a right answer, and that the assessment tool isn't the reason that that is not being able to be answered correctly.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure
Yep,
that
absolutely.
we
That's
have,
a-
with this separation,
Yeah.
that there was still going to be that
Oh, absolutely.
overflow where, maybe you gave the question and it got input wrong or something
Mm-hmm.
like that. So, I mean, we're field testing and doing all of that, and
And in fact, every year at the end of the year, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just forgot this other important part. At the end of the year, we look at all of those assessments and we look and do an item analysis. So let's say, we'll have a team look at all of the third grade interims. And we would look at all of those and we would say, is there one question that seemed to be marked, every student got correct, or every student got wrong, or a high percentage, a higher than we would expect to see, got it either
Okay,
right
that's
or
what I
wrong,
wanna
and
hear.
let's look at those questions. And
Okay.
so those changes or after that review process, if there's something that needs to be revised, then that happens so that it is better the next year.
thank you.
Thank you. Great question.
Thank you, Dr. Hall and Sam.
I have a
I'm
question for
interested.
them. Oh,
So-
sorry.
I'm noticing that our time, it's 7:30. We've got about an hour and a half left in our prospective, kind of commitment to maintain 3 to 4 hour long meetings. I'd like to close the discussion unless it's a burning question, Ashley, and then we can take a vote.
My question would be that I have a constituent who works at the state level who's heard some complaints coming out of our district that we have a backlog of 80 research and data requests, which are in part because of the breakup of the department. Can you give us information about the backlog of data requests and how data requests are being managed in this instance?
Sure, I would love to do that because while we have not yet been able to rehire a supervisor over assessment and evaluation who would take that over full-time, I have been reviewing those. I can tell you right now that we have approved 21 or 2. I have one that I have sent a request out for additional information. They did not include all of the required information in their application. And I believe I have one that came in today and 3 more that I need to review. So my backlog is 4, and I do not have any that have been received later than February 1st. So I am, again, not sure where that comes from, but I am within 2 weeks of having anybody reviewed come in. Nobody has waited longer than 2 to 3 weeks, which is what we say on the application would be the appropriate amount of time for them to expect a response.
Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and call it for a vote, starting with Board Member Bade.
Mohammed, yes.
Ryan Jensen, yes.
Amanda Longley, yes.
Charlotte Fife Jefferson, yes.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes. That motion passes. We'll revisit it when we get to the action agenda. The next item on our discussion agenda is the board calendar. I've asked Vice President Brian Jensen to lead this discussion this evening. Thank you, Brian.
Okay. We sent out a doodle poll about the board training, and we came back with 2 dates that were workable. There was April 19th, and then there was April 30th. I contacted USBA. Richard Stoll was not able to be there on the 19th, and he's an important piece to this. So April 30th, I spoke with Richard this afternoon, and he tells me that April 30th. They have it on their calendar and they are planning to be here. So if you could put that in your calendar, that would be great. It would be that 5 to 8 p.m. On the doodle poll, it told you the time, and
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it was 5 to 8
We
p.m.
get a lot of doodle polls.
Okay.
We were trying to find this.
So that would take care of the springtime professional development board training. But then we had also talked about having a board retreat. And we've had challenges finding any time in June. So in order to put together another doodle poll, I wanted to see how you felt, because right now when you look at the board calendar, we do not have on our website a date for our board meeting in July, and we don't have one for August. I know that in years past, we have also done the board retreat in August. Would August be a better month to be looking at? I'm seeing some thumbs up, okay? We're not going to get out our calendars right now, but if we put out a doodle poll in the next week or so, looking at dates in August, does that, do
Just
you
not on
think?
August 13th, okay?
Well, no, not on August 13th, that's my birthday.
Is it?
Yeah.
It's my anniversary.
The 6th or the 6th, that's my birthday.
Okay.
Okay, the 6th, the 13th.
Well, we can have
we're gonna
birthday
skip
cake.
over
Oh,
those.
or we can do it and have birthday cake.
And Brian,
Better be a really good one.
I would suggest doing what you did on the last doodle poll and put as many options out.
Yeah,
That was
we
great.
will. We'll try and have many options.
Thank you, Brian. Being that changing or adding to the board's calendar requires a vote, I would entertain a motion to move this item to the action agenda.
I'll make a motion to move the item to action agenda.
All right.
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, we'll start with a roll call vote with Vice President Jensen.
Brian Jensen, yes.
Amanda Longley, yes.
Charlotte Fife Jefferson, yes.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
All right, that motion passes. We'll revisit that. The next item on our discussion agenda is the district participation in unified sports. Dr. Grant, I believe we have Emily Sutherland with us this evening to present this.
We do. Thank you, Emily, for putting something together here.
Do I have to sit or can I stand?
You can stand.
Yeah.
I would love to. Okay. Great. Hi, everybody. I'm happy to be here and talk a little bit about unified sports. Okay. While we're getting the presentation up, Unified Sports, just so you know, is sponsored by Special Olympics of Utah. And it's a sports program for students with disabilities and students without disabilities to participate in sports together. So, oh, we have to go right into mine. Okay, hold on, I don't know if I'm ready for that. 1 minute, please. I wasn't expecting to use my own computer, so hold on. Nope, I'm good. Okay. Oh, there it is. I know what to do. It's okay, I got it. Got like eagle eyes. Yes. Okay. So, as I mentioned, Unified Sports is an opportunity. It's a sports program for our students with disabilities and our students without disabilities to participate in sports together. And it is sponsored by Special Olympics of Utah, but recently UHSAA has sanctioned 4 Unified Sports. which is very exciting. And those are soccer, basketball, track, and swimming. So that's an exciting development, and it really changes the way that our district would like to participate in unified sports, which is why we're presenting it to you all tonight. We have 2 comprehensive high schools currently who are, participating, Highland and West. And we currently we have volunteers and parents who are helping run the Unified Sports Program and using like their personal funds and our schools are using some funds to help the program run. But it's not a very systemic approach at this point. We have limited practice facilities. Our Unified Sports programs aren't currently integrated into the rest of our sports programs, like practice facility schedules and rotations. And so, they have limited facility use at this time and are kind of practicing during school hours and participating when they can. And I do want to just throw a shout out to Heather Brown at Highland, a parent at Highland who has really helped this program get established and get moved forward at Highland. We do probably have the most robust program at Highland right now, and she has put in a ton of time and effort and personal resources to have our students participate. So we really want to move the program forward from everything that she has already done and our current parents and players to really make the system, adopt the system from a district perspective and make it just a more robust program that our students can participate in. So again, I mentioned that Highland has sort of the most participation right now with soccer, basketball, and track. So this means that our athletes at Highland can participate in a unified sports program all year, because we have soccer in the fall, basketball in the winter, and track in the spring, which is great. West has soccer and basketball most solidly embedded at the school. I know I attended a track meet last spring, though, at West, a unified track meet at West last spring, which was amazing to see. And according to their current teacher, they are also looking to bring track on more regularly at West. And East, we don't have any unified sports programs at this time, but we are going to build that, and that's part of why we are doing this, to make our unified sports more consistent across all of our schools. And we'll be asking East to start participating in at least one sport next year. If they want to do more than that, great, but we'll need to help them build that and get that started over at East. And we're not entirely sure which sport they would like to start with yet. That's something that we will have to talk to them about. So again, ultimately, I would love to have each of our schools consistently participate in all 3 sports. That would give our unified athletes a chance to participate all year, regardless of what school they're at. We might not quite be there yet in our very first year, but hopefully over a couple of years, we can get there at all of our schools. And we are already there at Highland, which is wonderful. This is our current participation at Highland and West. So you can see that, how many boys are participating and how many girls are participating, and then their gen ed peers that are participating with them, and the total number of athletes there. So we feel like, in addition to district oversight with unified sports and funding, that we think that in order for unified sports to be more sustainable, that we need to get our school athletic directors involved. They are not currently involved in overseeing our unified sports at the schools. Again, that has been more of a special education approach and parent approach. And also our administration. I know Jeremy has been pretty involved in the unified sports over at Highland. And so we'd like to see our administration get involved as well. We want to make sure we can actually pay head coaches and assistant coaches like we do with our other sports programs. And we want to have a designated budget and fee schedule for our unified sports. So that, on this budget slide, so that we can fund equipment We can fund soccer balls and basketballs, and we can get them uniforms and maybe some sweats and things like that, some gear. So we would really like to be able to fund those things. So here's a budget. There's an estimated startup cost for all 3 comprehensive high schools, and we do want to shout out Salt Lake Ed Foundation for helping us cover the equipment as part of the startup costs. And then we have an ongoing funding below, which would of course be coaches' pay and transportation, busing and so on to get to different tournaments and competitions. I know that the fee schedule was presented at the last school board meeting, so this is just a repeat. Nothing's been changed on this. But I did want to add that these fees would be for a full year. So if a school participates in 3 sports, this would still be the same fee. If they participate in 1 sport or 2 sports, they would owe 1/3 or 2/3 of the fee. So, and please keep in mind that this is a total. Fee waivers would apply, just like they would in any other sport. And that certainly schools would not have to charge this much. So just like any other fee, this would be similar. We really just feel like we want to be able to cover, in order to make the program more systemic, we want to be able to cover the associated costs appropriately.
Emily, I'm so glad you mentioned that. I actually was talking with Alan about this earlier today. I was at the Highland basketball game on Friday, and a parent came up to me asking about the fees. They looked at our agenda, and I'm glad that I assured them that this is just a total of what it could be, and that fee waivers still apply. But I was a little worried because as I talking to a parent, she's like, I don't know if my kids can participate, and this seems like an exorbitant cost for our family right now. And so if we could just make, an emphasis that this isn't what our students would be paying, to participate, but these are fees associated with it, and that the waivers are still, an option, and it's not like every student has to pay this $683, but.
No, and Namani did do some research on this fee. We didn't just fabricate this number out of anything. He looked up UHSA, and this was a recommended fee, and it's by far like the lowest fee charged for any sport. So it's a pretty low fee. I know that doesn't mean it's not difficult for some families to be able to pay it. But yes, we're trying to make it reasonable, but also be able to fund things like a banquet, right? So that, or if they want to have, let's see, do I have banners on here on this one? I don't think we have banners on this one, but spirit packs, team gear, things like that. So we just want to be able to give all students recognition and acknowledgement for their participation in sports, just like we would do for, a football team or a lacrosse team or something like that.
Thank you.
Well, and piggybacking off of that, I hear what you're saying. Thank you, Nate, for what you're saying, because most people know that I've got a daughter with complex disabilities, so this community is very much a community that I'm a part of. And cost can be very restrictive, even if you're not falling within a financial area that you can automatically get fee waivers. So making it clear the ability for parents to get the fees waived is huge, because yes, where it may be one of the lowest fees charged, whenever, I'll use my child for an example, I have a medicine that the gross value is $20,000 that has to be given to her every 2 months. And so, wanting to provide your child with these opportunities when families are juggling some pretty cost prohibitive situations, you give up a lot of opportunity for your child. So just something, as you're going through this and you're working with athletic directors and all of that, the realities for families in this situation is a lot different than the typical family.
Okay, good point taken. Thank you for sharing that.
Thanks, Emily.
The last slide is just our next steps, which is that we request that the Salt Lake City School District School Board recognize Unified Sports as an official athletics program in Salt Lake City School District, equal in nature to other athletics programs, and approve the startup and ongoing budgets. So that's our request, and then I have a question slide as well, if you have any questions.
Yes.
Since we're there, just an extra emphasis to James Japius and SLEF because they've been extremely willing to step up and help propel the trajectory for unified sports, where it has been sitting on the backs of these parents, sacrificing quite a bit to get it to where it is, as well as Heather Brown has been phenomenal in that community there, just is extremely grateful for all of her sacrifice and efforts that she does. The one thing, and I did ask Alan, there's kind of a two-part thing. One, I'd like Alan to explain to the community the funding source and how the funding source for unified sports compares to the funding source for all athletics in the district. And then when that's done, I've got a second question for you.
Do you want me to turn back to the budget, or does it not? Okay.
So I believe it was last meeting, we had the school allocations budget discussion and showed the school allocations. One of the columns was extracurricular activities for our high schools. What we'll do is we'll add the amount that, for the ongoing funding to that column, which is property tax funded. So property tax, the levy controlled by the board, so it's consistent, it's ongoing. So and then we'll add it to that column, and then it will be ongoing year after year after year.
Thank you. And then the other clarification question I had for you, Emily, I believe your slide implied this, but just want clarification. So the money piece and the people request piece, it's for one coach per school, so 3 coaches and 3 assistant coaches for each of the schools separately, instead of one individual trying to manage all 3 schools.
Correct. So we're requesting a certain number of coaching days that would be offered just like we do for other sports. And I think we asked for 14 days for a head coach and 9 days for an assistant coach, which is similar to lacrosse and baseball. But basically that's just a payment equation. So yes, we're looking for a head coach and an assistant coach for each school.
So to add on to that, you were saying similar to lacrosse or whatnot. However, the unified sports is handling at least 2 of the schools, 3 sports.
Yeah.
So like, was that money compensation factoring that individual's actually coaching 3 sports, not just 1?
I'll have to get clarification on that from Namani to make sure I know if that was for the 3 sports or for just 1. So let me find out on that.
Okay, because I think that would be relevant. Do we want to compensate them for the amount of time, because it is quite a bit of time?
Yeah.
I think that question's basically on hold until we get clarity there, because if it's only funding a person to only do a third of the job, then that's a problem.
Right. And that's not the intent. The intent is to make sure that we are compensating. We're actually paying somebody to do the job instead of relying on volunteer work or asking a teacher to squeeze in unified sports amongst their other job duties. We want to compensate somebody for doing the work. And I just can't remember if the budget is for like 1 sport or for all 3.
So I guess my question to you all, if we don't have clarity on, so this is up for action, and we're not certain if we're approving the monies for a coach to be able to do all 3 sports, or if we're only approving money enough for 1 sport. That obviously I would be interested in this moving forward, but we've got incomplete information. So can we, I guess, support it, but with the contingency that we get a clarification on the money piece?
And that's time to you.
And I might suggest, because I was under the impression it was for the full year.
Okay.
But approve the budget request as is, and if we need to adjust it, we bring that back to the board. Because it would then require additional resources.
Ashley?
I have a question. When we have sanctioned new sports, it's been happening, somewhat frequently over the past couple of years. So my question is, do athletic directors have the support they need to sustain our existing and our new UHSAA activities? And if not, what will athletic directors reasonably need in addition to what's outlined here to manage the number of new sports that we've sanctioned? or that we've approved in the district, which were sanctioned by UHSAA?
Yeah, we meet with athletic directors regularly, and I have not heard specific concerns that they feel they're unable to handle. Like, if we approve this and we move forward with this, then that would be esports, and unified sports would be sort of the new asks. And I don't know that athletic directors would, other than perhaps helping with some transportation and stuff for esports, I'm not really sure that would be a huge ask on our athletic directors, but I can definitely ask them about that and see if they feel like they need support. So I can find out more about that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions for Emily? Brian?
So I just want to get clarification. You're telling us that the total 69,000 for all three high schools, that probably needs to be adjusted? Is that what?
Well, I'm thinking it does not, but, so what I'm saying is approve it as presented, and then if we find that it does, then we'll bring that back to the board for further discussion.
I'll entertain a motion to move this to the action agenda.
I make a motion to move this to the action agenda.
Second.
Being that we'll have more discussion and we're monitoring our time, I'll go ahead and call it for a vote, starting with you, Amanda.
Amanda Longwell, yes.
Charlotte Fife Jefferson, yes.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Meek Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
Ryan Jensen, yes.
All right, that motion passes. Thank you, Emily.
Yes, thank you.
We'll move on to our next agenda item, which is a training on the school land trust, our annual involvement there. Dr. Grant, I believe we have Dr. Taylor, and, there's a few folks coming up.
We have some fine area directors and Title I director coming up.
Excellent, thank you.
Sam, do I have to plug in over here?
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I have the opportunity to really invite my team to provide this training for you. You're in the hands of some great people, and I look forward to reviewing and seeing this interaction.
Really hyped you up, so
No pressure.
better deliver.
See how I do. This is test number 1. There we go. Okay. Well, thank you for having us today. We're happy to bring you this required annual training. So I'm Dr. Christine Marriott. I'm the Director of Title I and School Improvement. I've been in the district a very, very long time. And I taught at Northwest Middle School a long time ago and have been in the district in a couple of other roles as assessment director. I've been a principal and assistant principal at a number of different schools. And I'm super happy to be back and absolutely thrilled to be on the team that I'm on. So thank you, colleagues, for being here. Go ahead.
Tracy Vandy Venter. Again, as Christine's mentioned, I've been with Salt Lake for 20 years and stepped away for a little bit to try some different opportunities, but glad to be back and glad to be here to help share this information with you.
I am Lisa Young. I am one of the 4 area directors. I support about half of our elementary schools. This is my 2nd year in Salt Lake City School District. So 2 of about 25 in education, different roles, but I am thrilled to be here and I love the opportunity to support our principals.
Okay, so our purpose tonight is again to provide you this required annual training, in particular about the School Land Trust Program. We will be reviewing your responsibilities as board members in relation to the school community councils and again specifically the Land Trust Program. So we're going to share this process for your review this year when you're receiving the plans. Make sure you understand the timelines and what the task and your role is, and you can ask questions as we go or at the end, and we'll take it away from there. Can we do this for you? Is that okay? Yeah, sure.
Okay. So the school land trust funding comes to our district, and the first large chunk of land trust funding gets divided out to all of the school districts with a base funding formula. That's about 10% of it, and then the remaining 90% is per pupil. So the larger districts get a little more, but not really more per pupil in total. It is quite a large amount of funding. It's been coming every year for as long as I've been in Utah. It's just a very useful and purposeful piece of funds, so it's great that we're continuing to receive it. And so we'll go pass it off to Lisa.
So what does that mean for Salt Lake City School District? About $3 million, an increase of almost $96,000 for the 24-25 school year.
An important part of our land trust program is the school community council members, and we've got some members here listed. Of course, our principal who serves but is not elected. Then we've got our parent and guardian members, and they must have children enrolled at the school for at least one of those 2 years. And they are elected by their peers. They're elected by parents and guardians. And then we also have school employee members, and they have to be employed at the school and elected by school employees. And there is a ratio too. We need to have more parents than school employees to have a full council. We also have our responsibilities of the council. So the first bar across the top there is, of course, just adopting the rules of order and procedures so that they can have a successful meeting. And then as we move on, we recognize that there's a role for that community council to advise and make recommendations. Listed there, you'll see what those recommendations are. So different programs, making decisions about how the school may make decisions about how to roll out different efforts for supporting their students. Also, the safe walking route is part of community council and their recommendations. And this was really an important part this last year when we had school closures, that community council needed to step in and help us create new safe walking routes. We looked at student safety, and the council weighs in on that, and other issues as well that might deal with some specific community involvement or environment or support that would help our students learn. The last section you can see there is with our school land trust plan, and this is something that is mandatory for the community council to actively participate in, advise, and make recommendations for that land trust plan. And then they vote to approve that final plan. And once they've got that vote, they sign the assurances also, not only saying that they voted, but that they were actively involved in developing that land trust plan as they move forward.
Okay, we have a great video from USBE Land Trust, and I'm happy to play it now, but I'm not sure if, I know we invited you to watch that on your own. It's available all the time, so we don't have to play that now. We can skip over it, and then you have that available as a resource for you. It's a fun little video. Okay, so your timeline this year is you will be receiving land trust and school improvement plans from each school on April 15th at the board meeting on April 15th. You will have about 1 week to review the plans that are assigned to you. You'll provide feedback to schools by April 22nd. And then the schools, the principal with their committee and their SEC members have time to make some adjustments if needed. And then you will receive those plans back again with those adjustments. You'll get those on May 6th, and we would ask that at that time you'll be ready to vote to approve those plans. The land trust plans are due to USBE no later than May 15th. So we don't have any extra weeks built in. We've given schools as much time as we possibly can to generate their plans, and our goal is to get all of those approved plans off to USBE Land Trust on time by May 15th. The one exception to this timeline is that charter schools in Utah have an accelerated timeline for their approval. So we have 2 charter schools, that's Salt Lake Center for Science Education, SLCSD High School, and Open Classroom. And in those cases, for the land trust portion of their plan, you will be receiving those 2 schools' land trust plans on March 18th. You'll have that 1 week opportunity to provide feedback. And then when you receive those plans on April 15th, we would ask that those 2 schools have their land trust portion approved on that day. And that is because the state requires charter schools to have their land trust plans finalized by May 1st. So that is your timeline. It's a little bit choppy, just slightly different with those charters. On April 15th, you'll have access to a folder with all of the school land trust plans and school improvement plans. You will have your reviewer assignments. You will have access to a copy or a scanned copy of the council signature form from each school. And then you'll also have a review form that you can use to provide feedback to those schools. So each one of you will be reviewing a number of plans. Every school will have 2 reviewers, and they'll have the opportunity to receive that feedback from 2 board members. We gave you your assignments, you can see, so in a couple of weeks you'll be starting to receive these plans. We do have just a couple of adjustments that have been made to these reviewer assignments. One of those is, I just want you to note that Skyview Academy does not receive land trust funding. So Skyview won't have a land trust plan for approval, but they will have a school improvement plan. Questions so far? Okay.
In that backup, you'll have the plan review forms for both the land trust plan and the full school improvement plan. You would review the land trust plan separately using this form. The rubric here is aligned to the trust program assurances, so that when you assure, we assure, and then the land trust team at USBE would have the same assurances.
And as Lisa mentioned, we have worked hard to build this process into one cycle. So you have the land trust piece that will be there that will require your review and assurances, but also we will have our full school improvement plan connected to that. So that land trust will be embedded into the school improvement plan, and will have also its state required forms. But you can see this format is slightly different, and this is for the overall school improvement plan. And again, just has you mark yes or no for all the followings. That is an assurance that you have seen and reviewed those and that they are present. So that will be a second piece on your reviewing sheet.
Okay, so this is just kind of a rehash of the timeline. The point of this slide is that as you review the land trust plans and the full school improvement plan, and have those approved plans done by May 15th, that allows us to provide the full school improvement plans to USBE by their deadline of June 30th. So that is the program. Any questions?
Ashley?
Yes, I have 2 questions. The first is, how does the district expect that the land exchange that was advanced by Senator Curtis will impact our schools? Like, will that timeline affect this year's land trust allocation?
It shouldn't. We have not been made aware of any issues that will cause. So
It wouldn't be an issue, it'd be more money. So it's an exchange of lands, environmentally sensitive lands are exchanged. It's how, under Grand Staircase, we had like the biggest growth in land trust. So my question is not, will there be problems? It's, will we see new money soon? Or do we expect that it would take a long time? And if there's not an answer, yes.
So we've received the allocations, and generally, once they've given us, they do not change them again for next year. So any change will be like the year after.
And my second question is to you, Board President Salzar, which is, when will we be reviewing our obligation to address ongoing and ubiquitous requests? I've asked about this in the last 4 meetings where land trust was discussed, and we've yet to have that discussion.
I'm not sure. I think I have to go back and listen to the notes and the minutes and whatnot. And it might be best if we go through the formal process to have that be an agenda item.
I've already done that, and we haven't done it. And it's not, I shouldn't have to request it, it's our statutory obligation.
Okay, Vice President Jensen and I are gonna have to, meet and discuss when we can get that on an agenda then.
Okay, great, thanks.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
can I just follow up? Ashley, what do you want to explore on that?
We have an obligation in statute to look at when requests are the same year over year and trying to find ways to include those in our budget. So it's not something I want to do, it's something we are obligated to do,
So
to
that it
understand if
becomes-
we're paying for, 90% of our requests are for academic interventionists. It's our job as a board to say, how can we actually just fund academic intervention? Because all land trust plans should ideally be more distinct from one another. And when they're not, it's our role to say, how are we putting all of this in our budget? And that's part of our job in evaluating these plans.
Thank you.
I have a question. Do you know what state statute that is?
I don't have the number. It's in some of the land trust training videos that are available, not this one, but I can find it and send it to you.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you
Thank
to our
you.
area director team and Dr. Taylor. Our next item on the discussion agenda is reconfigure Nibley Park as a K through 6 school. Dr. Grant, do you want to introduce this?
Sure, and I'm going to invite our team up of Kesley Green, our principal, and Dallin Miller, our area director, and I believe Dr. Tiffany Hall. Are you staying up there as well? Thank you, Dr. Taylor. You can stay right there. Maybe we require that you stay right there. So there was in the middle school report the recognition that our students in 7th and 8th grade at Nibley Park are receiving a different kind of education than our students in 7th and 8th grade across our middle schools. This has been on the district's radar for a long time. And I know that it's been a matter of concern among some teachers and certainly some leaders in the district. And so wanted to bring that forward. We're in this funny period, though, between being under an old G5 policy or a current G5 policy, which allows the superintendent to make grade level reconfigurations. The new G5 policy, as written and presented by the policy committee, has a different process for dealing with grade level reconfigurations. So what I wanted to do is to bring to the board the question of which direction would you like me to move as superintendent, under the old G5 policy or the new G5 policy? And I wanted to just make sure that I am recognizing your role in making policy and making these decisions, and so didn't want to move forward under the existing G5 policy because we're in this odd interim period considering a new one. So didn't want to step too far without your support in moving in a particular direction. So to help think about this, so under the old policy, it again is the superintendent's discretion to move forward with these things. Under the new policy, we would have a conversation in board meeting. If it is supported by the board to move forward, we'd bring it back for a second conversation in board meeting, as well as a chance to bring public comment to the board. So, and then under the new G5, we would complete that process by the end of March. So we can, with this, move in either direction. That's what I wanted to try and offer you, is that we're following along the new G5 policy by bringing this to you now, but can also move in the other direction. But I wanted to give you some background on this so you have more knowledge about it, and appreciate Principal Green for being here and for having the many conversations that you've had within your building about this as you've taken on the leadership of Nibley Park. So with that, we have this presentation, and I'll turn it to you guys to provide some background here to the board.
Okay, thank you. This is just a little bit of background around some of these things. I'd like to begin with just some information that Mr. Miller and I actually dug out of some very old, well, not very old because I was alive at this time, but some board agendas and other documentation that we actually found as we were shutting down the old building in some files around how Nibley Park became a K-8 school. And there was quite a bit of planning and discussion for this. And during that discussion, the vision for Nibley Park was always that it would be, or that would include a very robust 7th and 8th grade program with about 150 students and about 8 or more faculty that would be providing that 7th and 8th grade curriculum to students. First year that this program went into play was 2007. They started with just 7th graders, 30 of them, and the data here show the number of 7th and 8th graders over time to date. And one of the things that you'll notice is that the program has never reached that dream of 150 7th and 8th graders at the school, which of course, as you know, impacts the number of FTE that are placed there at the school.
Currently, we looked at our numbers at Nibley Park, and you'll see that we have, in 6th grade, we've got 44 gen ed students. That is not including our DLI program that was moved there this year. That currently has 18 students. And the 6th graders do not stay for the 7th and 8th grade years for DLI. They move on to Clayton. So we're not including them in our total. As far as our 7th graders, we've got 45 students for a total of 89 6th and 7th graders. And the other piece to that is that the K-8 model only serves the gen ed students in that building. It doesn't serve the DLI students, and it doesn't serve the essential element students either. The next slide shows what our middle school program in other schools around the district and what our state is asking us to provide. Gives you the layout there. And currently at Nibley Park, we've got 3 teachers teaching 7th and 8th grade, teaching math, language arts, and science. Most teachers are teaching 3 to 4 preps. They're teaching Science 6, Science 7, Science 8, Health, sometimes another elective or a Tier 2 class, which can be burdensome on a teacher. And that, in addition, the schedule that Kesley put in this year does allow for our students to have access to health, digital literacy, and CCA daily, whereas prior years it was weekly, which was more of an elementary model. Students also are getting music, PE, art, and library at once a week, which is more of an elementary model, whereas if they were in a middle school model, they would have access to those other classes daily. As we dove into that schedule and looked at it a little bit more.
Nibley Park is a unique K-8 school, and over the years, our 7th and 8th grade enrollment has remained small. This has presented significant challenges in providing a comprehensive middle school experience. With only a handful of teachers for these grades, our students have limited access to courses offering compared to their peers at traditional middle schools. Honors courses, world languages, and full range of CTE pathways are simply not possible with the current structure. Some members of my community value the small school setting and feel that when the district introduced the K-8 model 20 years ago, it was not intended to mirror the traditional middle school, and these families like the idea of this smaller school. However, as a public school, we also have a responsibility to ensure that all students receive an equitable access to educational opportunities. The reality is that meeting these middle school course requirements with our current structure is challenging. Our limited staff means that some teachers are teaching multiple preps, and students do not have access to the range of courses available at a traditional middle school. This creates a fundamental conflict between the original vision for Nibley Park K-8 and and the academic expectations placed on middle school students today. Through this process, I've worked hard to be transparent as possible with all my stakeholders, acknowledging both the benefits and the challenges we face. My role to present these realities honestly and to advocate for the needs of our students.
Last, we just want to recognize that the students attending Nibley Park, they are in Hillside Boundaries. That's their boundary school. However, if they would choose, if they were interested in a different school, Clayton or neighboring Glendale or Bryant Middle School, they have access to open enrollment that they could apply to any of those schools as well.
Any questions for our Nibley team? Ashley?
Do students at Nibley Park show lower academic performance or preparation for high school than their counterparts?
Go ahead.
So not in the 3 tested subjects. We have looked at ELA, math, and science, and there isn't an appreciable difference in those subjects between students moving from Nibley to high school from one of our traditional middle schools to high school. I think one of the questions is, though, is in our untested subjects, such as music or arts, drawing, any of those areas that perhaps they haven't had that comprehensive experience. In fact, we were thinking today about music in particular, arts in particular. In a traditional middle school, a student taking even a semester of an art class would have roughly 90 hours of instruction over a semester, where a student in an art class in 8th grade at Nibley might have 45 minutes once a week over a year, so a significantly smaller amount of time. But we don't have good ways of measuring those, of course, because we don't have that data around them.
That makes a lot of sense. And another question is, this was alluded to in an email about this, and then also a little bit in terms of what recruitment there would need to be to make it more robust. Are all of the current 7-8 teachers at Nibley Park licensed to teach secondary school?
I actually asked Logan Hall to prepare an answer on that. So I'm going to call him up. Thank you, Logan.
Absolutely, that's a good question. All of our teachers are certified to teach. What's unique about a middle school is that the state of Utah offers 2 different types of licensure for, just basic licensure for classroom teachers. Either a K through 8 elementary license or a grade 6 through 12 secondary license. The teachers who teach in the 7th and 8th grade program at Nibley Park have a mixture of both. In order to teach in a middle school model, one has to have either license, but you need to have endorsements in the particular subject-specific content area that they're instructing in. And so the teachers that are working in this program either do have a secondary or an elementary license that covers, like I said, K through 6, or sorry, K through 8, or grades 6 through 12. But in addition to that, we've ensured that they have additional licensure endorsements to cover the subject specifics that they are required to teach. Does that answer all your questions?
Yeah, that's really helpful.
Terrific.
I have one more question, which starts with a reminder that, maybe not everyone would know this, but the district did invest a lot of money to make Nibley a K-8. It's not that Nibley existed and it ended up housing 7 and 8 students, but investment was made to add on to make the building substantially larger. So should Nibley conclude 7-8 offerings, what would the plan be for additional space, or how does that intersect with your question about G5 and how to proceed?
I'd like to make when we did school closure, we were careful to try and keep any sort of use for the property separate from the decision. There are space needs that we have for classroom space within the district, so that would be a place of consideration. So there's some ways that I think the space can be well used, but if you don't mind, I would rather keep that until we make a decision that's a little bit separate, if that feels okay to you.
It does, and what that makes me move toward is believing that aligning with the new G5 procedures will be most prudent, because that would allow for space use as established by the board. So just as one opinion, I think aligning with the new procedures would allow us to get from start to finish of this recommendation in the most productive way that does account for some of the space considerations as well.
Thanks, Ashley.
Any other questions? Amanda?
I can't remember a particular community comment, but, I mean, Ashley kind of summed up where the new G5 would be more prudent regardless, but I did have a community member talk about adding on modular units at Nibley Park to give the kids there more robust access, if I can remember exactly how it was. So maybe once things are moved, that may be less relevant, but it's kind of curious that that would even be a need if there was a add-on to that building. So I wonder how much extra spaces actually would be available. I don't need this answered, but it's just something that was commented on in this process, as I've been receiving a lot of community concerns and input from students, parents, teachers. I'm getting the whole array.
Amanda, may I just ask on that? The first part of that I thought was about programming for kids. Is that what you were
I
mentioning?
think that was what it was, and I could go to the emails. It really, I
Okay.
don't really feel like I need to get into the details of it. When we can talk more about it after.
Okay.
Because I can pull that up specifically, but it was curious that that individual kind of even threw that out as a suggestion if we really, if there was additional space added to that building specifically for this project. So I think.
You mean more space than there is now?
We'll go into that later.
Okay, thanks. I was just going to turn to
Ultimately, the
principal
question,
to
yeah, and
answer something.
the
that's
ultimate question
useful.
you're asking is whether we should use the old G5 or the new G5, so we'll get there to that one.
Okay, thank
But I did want to say to, is it Kesley?
Yes.
That it was great that you acknowledged the community's desires for wanting to continue the 7 to 8, because that's what I'm hearing as well. And obviously, as you pointed out, there's a balance there, and there's other things. And as I've communicated back to the community, that, you know, we'll do our best to weigh what their concerns are, as we're also having to juggle the overarching needs of the district. I am very concerned that I was not aware. I am going over to Nibley Park tomorrow, but it is concerning that students with disabilities are not able to access the 7-8 program whenever they are accessing the K through 6. So that is an issue for me. But ultimately, getting to the same place that Ashley did is, my recommendation is also that we use the new G5 that's in process, to where we give the opportunity for community feedback. And also, I also wanted to strongly emphasize the current version that is up for potential another amendment based on some additional suggestions and asks that I had. One of the consistent asks that I have is that we make these decisions early enough in the current year that it isn't leaving families, teachers, et cetera, in a lurch because we're making them so late in the school year. So the current version of the proposed G5, I think if you stated, and I could pull it here, says by March 30th, then we could still enact this for the upcoming school year. And as a parent, I would be pissed. I mean, if I'm finding out at this point, regardless of any kind of concessions and supports that the district is giving, that, oh, what? I've got to completely configure what I'm doing for my students, my family, everything this late in the school year when open enrollment started in December. Just no. If at this late in the process, this should be for a decision for not 25, 26, but for 26, 27.
Charlotte?
I don't think I have any questions.
Okay.
Can I make a
Brian.
comment? I appreciate, Ashley and Amanda, your thoughts about relying on the proposed G5 revisions that, the policy committee has worked on this for a long time. One of the things that I do want to clarify, though, Amanda, is under the current policy, the superintendent can do this at her discretion, okay? The new revisions are providing for that March 30th timeframe. I know that each of you did receive a copy of that, and there are three parts to it. There's Part A, where the superintendent makes a recommendation. There's Part B, if the board approves that recommendation, then they move forward with it being brought to a public meeting and a board meeting, which would, not suggest, which would require that this would have to be done in the next board meeting in order to meet the March 30th deadline, okay? I just want it to be that we're understanding that when we're following the revisions that we're still in the process of approving, that's what we would be doing. And I myself think that that's the approach that we should take. We were trying to address these types of concerns in the policy committee when we were developing these revisions. And then I appreciate hearing from, all of you that the teachers do have the necessary licenses and endorsements to be providing what is absolutely required for middle school students. Thank you.
All right, well, I still think the question before the board is providing the superintendent with some direction. I will say that I expressed this to Brian and to the superintendent, that we're a little nervous of following a procedure that the board hasn't adopted yet. But I also recognize that, the superintendent has discretion here too. And I appreciate you, bringing this to the board, just to make sure that we're in a good spot in the discussion relative to the topic. But we are still here today to, kind of give some direction to the superintendent. I don't think we necessarily need to make a vote. But nonetheless, we do need to give Liz some direction about how she should move forward, how she would like to move forward. So I'm hearing a couple of folks who've mentioned that, the potentially new G5 administrative procedures is what we should follow. Are there any other differing opinions on that as the discussion has gone?
Yeah, I do share your concern in terms of, applying a policy that we have not yet voted for and adopt. Currently we do have a policy that's in there. Until we vote for the other one, then we can apply it. There's just but at the same time, I have no idea what are the ramifications of using the policy that we have not voted for yet in making such a big decision.
Michelle, do you have anything to add before
Yeah.
we move on to the second round?
I mean, it would just be us asking Dr. Grant to follow the spirit of us, if we intend to, to go by the new one that will be adopted very soon, Oh, potentially.
Well, and additionally, the proposed G5 is actually meant to do right for the
Point of
community
order.
by being more prudent.
Oh,
in
point
that
of order?
process. Sorry.
You just have to, the speaker was not recognized by the president.
I'll accept the point of order. Do you have anything else to add?
No.
Amanda, we'll start round two with you.
Oh, and just apologies.
No worries.
But just to emphasize that the proposed G5 is to do better, to do right for the community. And so that's what I believe all of us want to do, is to do right for the community. And so, emphasizing, Grant coming to all of us to ask, And the general, I feel that we all feel strongly we want to do right. And this is what we are reiterating, is why we're wanting to go the route of the proposed G5 as we're working through the nuances of it. So just to clarify, Mohammed, that that's why we're leaning that direction.
And perhaps I can share that if we do move in that direction, and that's the will of the board, then in the next meeting, we would have public comment. We'd put it on as a discussion item for the board. And in between, also, Principal Green has held a time for us to do an open house at the school. So there's not just one moment for parents to express their wishes and interests, but rather we can hold that as well, which we were thinking next week, I believe. Yeah, the 12th. So that we are trying to get some feedback from families that are involved in this as well.
So I guess back to the question, you know, how do we want to direct the superintendent moving forward? Again, we have two to follow the potentially new G5, and then there's been some comments. I'm good either way, but nonetheless, I just want to make sure that, Dr. Grant, you have what you need to move forward.
Thanks.
So I'm supportive of you in either the current G5 or the potentially new one.
Are you needing us to make a motion?
I don't think we need to make a motion on this one relative to the superintendent's discretion to make the decision, but it was important for Liz to bring it to us so that we could be okay with what she's planning on doing. Charlotte?
Could we take a temperature check to see?
Straw poll?
Yeah, straw poll about, oh, I was thinking about, do we think we're going to pass the new G5 policy, or, sorry, the procedures, or both?
I'd
Next
hesitant
week.
to the policy element of it,
Next
rather
time.
than stick to the original question, being that G5 isn't on the agenda
Okay.
this evening, except in this context. But I think I would feel more comfortable keeping it to the question at hand, if that's okay.
Okay, so a straw poll about this?
Current G5
Yeah.
or potentially new adopted G5. Mohammed?
My question is to the superintendent. You know, from your own, you know, literally speaking, which one would work best? Because, you know, the concern we have is we want to make sure the community is aware of what's going on. But also there is a town hall, you know, that's going to actually give a bit of a time and more feedback and information to the community, so.
That's a hard one to answer. I don't know what is best. Certainly, it's simplest for me to move forward and have those public engagements and things like that. But again, I didn't want to overstep. I know the board's interest is clear in the proposed G5, and so didn't want to overstep that. I would certainly land usually on the most simple one. I don't know that that's the best in terms, it depends on what stakeholder you are perhaps in this process, so that's a little bit hard. Sorry, I'm giving pretty wimpy answers here.
No, it was good.
Rather than some clarity, but
It was a good answer.
okay, I hope that's helpful.
Yep.
So we can have a straw poll.
Let's do a straw poll.
Okay.
For board members that would like to direct the superintendent to use the current model, please give a thumbs up. Board members who would like to direct the superintendent to use the potentially new adopted model, please give a thumbs up. Superintendent, you got your direction?
I do, thank you. So what we'll do is put this on the agenda for the 18th. We'll invite the public to come and give comment. We'll have a special set-aside time, so we'll probably overlap that with the fee schedule, so that we have a time certain, so families are aware of when they don't have to sit here all day. And they can speak perhaps as long as they would like. Well, in terms of how much time we give, we restrict the amount of minutes for each person, but not restrict the amount of time in total. And then we'll also hold a open house at Nibley Park. And thank you, Kesley, thanks for your work on this.
Thank you, Nibley team. Alan, Tiffany, and Lisa.
Thank you.
Our next agenda item, moving through this as quickly as we can, consideration of a resolution authorizing the issuance and sale of up to $155 million of general obligation bonds and providing for related matters. Alan, do you mind taking this?
Right, so the public voted to authorize $730 million bonds. As we discussed in multiple of those bond conversations, we don't issue all those bonds at once. You know, we kind of need the money as the construction projects go along. We talked about a 5-year period of, a fifth. So we are planning on selling the first bond issuance here, probably in May. And what this document does is set forth the parameters, really the maximum amount of the first bond issuance, which is $155 million. We may end up issuing a little bit under that, but the parameters say that is the maximum that we would issue in this first round, to kind of help fund these construction projects as they get underway. And with that, we need, board approval. I want to look at my financial advisor and bond counsel back there. Is there anything I'm missing?
Just a reminder, this will be a two-step process that you'll have one other resolution to adopt. This just starts it.
In April. I believe the second one's in April, correct? So with that, looking for board approval to approve the parameters that are on the document.
Any discussion or a motion? I'll entertain a motion to move this to action.
I'll make a motion to move this to action.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll start with the roll call vote with Charlotte.
Charlotte Fife Jefferson, yes.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
Ryan Jensen, yes.
Amanda Longoria, yes.
All right, that motion passes. We'll move on to the action agenda. It is jam-packed, and we're going to try to have a stop time of 9 tonight. I know that goes a little bit over than our commitment, but nonetheless, we do have a number of things to go through. The first 3 items were moved off of the tabled section that were from the consent agenda from our previous meeting, which are the Core Technologies LLC, the Kick-Up Incorporated, MGT of America.
I don't believe I'm allowed to batch them in our procedures, but I would move that we approve Core Technologies LLC as posted on the past consent agenda.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Core Technologies, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for a roll call vote, starting with Ashley Anderson.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
Ryan Jensen, yes.
Charlotte Fife Jefferson, yes.
And then Amanda, did you want to vote on?
Oh, sorry. Amanda Longoria, yes.
All right, that motion passes.
I would additionally move that we approve the MGT of America Consulting LLC expense as posted on a past consent agenda.
All right, we have a motion, and is there a second?
Second.
All right, got a second. Any discussion? All right, seeing none, we'll start with a roll call vote with myself, Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
Ryan Jensen, yes.
Amanda Longoria, yes.
Charlotte Fife Jefferson, yes.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
All right, that passes. We still have the Kick-Up Incorporated.
I have a question about that, if I may. My question about the kick-up is that if you look at our past meeting, when we approved that expense, we were told it was the second time, and we would have an evaluation of the program before we were asked to approve it again. So my question is why we did that step out of order, and why we don't have a report before being asked to approve the expense again.
Would we direct that to Alan or to the superintendent? I think Alan? Superintendent, okay. Sorry.
Dr. Hall, do you have anything to add? I would just say, I think somehow we missed that was the board direction. Was that the will of the board at the time to do that?
It was verified in an email that you would do it, so I don't know that the whole board agreed, but in our procedures, if someone asks for it and no one objects, it's considered an ask, and then it was re-verified in email.
And the ask for the evaluation, I can find the email, I guess, but was there a specific about it?
There had been some faculty complaints about the expense when we had approved it on 2 prior consent agendas. So it was, what are we spending this money on, and how did faculty perceive the use of Kick-Up, and was it working before renewing?
Ashley, do you want that information now, or is later okay?
I mean, we have to move on now, so I would say I would stand by not approving an expense when we were told a report would come before being asked to approve it. But I don't know from Dr. Hall the urgency with which we need to approve this request, and if there was time in the subsequent meeting to provide the information that was requested.
Is there an urgency?
I believe if we did it at the next meeting, the company would not throw me out.
But could they, I guess?
And the report could come by email, perhaps? It need not be on the board agenda.
I think that'd be fine if it was a memo evaluating the program and explaining the impacts of the expense.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Dr. Hall.
So we'll revisit this at the next meeting then?
Yep.
Moving on, the next item on our action agenda is the district reorganization. I know there's been some discussion back and forth. We heard from Dr. Hall and Sam about, Brian and other board members' questions regarding assessment. But I do feel like we're at a spot now where, since it's on the action agenda, I'll entertain a motion so we can further discussion.
I move that we put this on the action agenda.
We're already
Or,
there.
I'm sorry. What do,
To approve or?
oh, I move that we approve the reorg.
I second.
We got a motion and a second on the table. Open it up for discussion. Ashley?
I'll just explain my vote. As of this afternoon, I've heard from 56 faculty and staff who've asked me to oppose this if the district office can't pump the brakes to respond to questions and concerns or to provide evidence supporting the recommendation. I've thought a lot about something the superintendent said in our last meeting. Dr. Grant, you said you didn't know how we would hear from people concerned about reorganization if they were fearful of retaliation in their workplace hierarchy, and I believe that the answer is us. And to that end, 56 staff members in our district reached out to me because they knew that there was a representative of their neighborhood or the neighborhood of their school who could not retaliate against them. And some of the concerns they presented to me were specific, and they include: the associate superintendent in the proposal has no reports, which is not best practice. Librarians will fall under STEM and report to the current math director. Family members have supervisory roles over other family members. Social studies falls in what some have complained is a catch-all category rather than being aligned with ELA as it is in the K-6 core. The restructuring of assessment has caused some substantial problems, as reported by people in the department. And they also wanted to know why we weren't presented with examples of other successful organizational charts that Board Member Jensen requested in the last meeting. Some of the other questions posed by faculty and staff were quite broad. That's not been 3 minutes, right? Does having much more top-down structure benefit classrooms? Does this align with our district values? Why have we yet to have a discussion about the benefits to students? What problems does this reorganization intend to address? And why have the board and staff ignored the research that shows some of the problems with this recommendation? I also have financial questions which I feel have not been sufficiently addressed, and I believe the reorganization will be fiscally irresponsible because it ignores best practices for direct reports that set us up for inflated costs and a series of promotions. The promotions that we would be approving for teaching and learning pave the way for the same types of promotions in school leadership, where the number of direct reports in the recommendation far outpaces best practice. As one more reminder, before tonight, our board has spent 48 total minutes discussing this proposal. We've spent more time this year discussing our calendar. It's a dangerous precedent to spend so little time discussing something so consequential for students, and even more dangerous to move a proposal forward when no evidence has been presented as to the efficacy of the decision.
Thank you, Ashley. Superintendent?
I just wanted to add the information that was sent by email, responding to a great many of those issues, not all of them that you have named, that provided information relative to that, related to those questions, and I believe provided answers on those.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
That we, yeah.
Charlotte?
I didn't know about the 56 staff who had contacted you. That would have probably been good to know.
They should have contacted
Yeah.
us too.
I haven't heard from anybody. So have any of the other board members heard from anybody? Okay.
I've heard from two.
Two.
Thanks, Charlotte. Amanda?
There's two things I want to point out. One, to answer your question, Charlotte, I mentioned it earlier, but I did specifically email SLCSD and said, please send out to the community, please reach out to me if there's any concerns. And no concerns were relayed. I reached out to SLEA. Like, I made a concerted effort to reach out to the community, to all the stakeholders, and I pretty much got crickets, other than, well, I guess to answer your question, there was one. And so what I've heard is, let's move forward. And then additionally, the board asked Dr. Grant to specifically have a, let me find the title so I say it correctly. An associate superintendent instead of what she was proposing, a different position.
Chief of Staff.
Sorry, what?
Chief of Staff.
Chief of Staff, thank you, which costs more money to have that position. So I just find it ironic, the frustration about added expenses in this org chart whenever the board asked for a position that is comes at a higher price tag. So, I mean, those are, I guess we all know where we all stand, so we just need to figure out how to move forward.
Thank you, Amanda. Any other discussion points we can move into round two?
I would provide one more
Oh,
point
wait,
of,
Brian, did you want to go for
No,
round one?
you can finish yours. and then
Round
I
two.
can go.
I was just going to provide a clarification that one FTE is not considered a financial cost savings, and the kind of cost increases I'm talking about are large cascading institutional increases that we're also approving as part of this. Well, the only way we're saving money is on the back of equity. We are eliminating an equity office, and that is the only cost savings we have. And I would say, again, for anyone confused about the perspectives that I've raised, it's because we have steamrolled this decision instead of having a normative discussion with a process. And the only other comment I'd make is I did implore board leadership to establish a process by which we established a certain number of discussion periods we would have, and we have not been able to do that. And any confusion anyone has, I think, lies on as a responsibility of having less than 1 hour to discuss this item in total.
Brian?
I just have a couple of questions, and the first one was, and we don't have the slides up in front of us, but when you look at the slides, it shows that there was a reduction in expenditures and that it would be a $98,000 reduction. But that, as Ashley was saying, comes by eliminating the executive director of equity. But my question is, when you do that, will you, because there's going to be an equity director that will need to be hired to report to Dr. Lisa, if I'm reading that correctly, so that expense will then be added back in?
No, that's an open position.
That's already allocated.
Yep, and we've actually posted that, I believe. Yes, we have. We've actually received applications for that role because that was the same role that's been in the district for some time.
Okay, and then I don't know necessarily the best way to explain this, but with the different positions that are now reporting to Dr. Taylor, will they, because of added responsibilities, are we going to be looking at that we'll need to increase their lane or their pay, or do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, and the way Board Member Anderson had raised this was there are a number of direct reports under Dr. Taylor, more than in some literature says is appropriate. As Dr. Taylor has explained, and I shared with the board in writing, that those positions being senior positions require some less supervision and things, and there are circumstances where that's just fine in an office hierarchy. The concern would be that if that becomes unwieldy, then we would go to more of a hierarchical model, which may put some people under others, and then the person at the top may then get a boost of salary moving from a director 3 to a director 2, or director 2 to a director 1 kind of thing. Those salaries are at about $2,000 to $3,000 a year is the difference between director levels. If I got that about right, Logan, somewhere in there. So that a future change, Board Member Anderson was concerned, may cost us more, but not current as set up right now, but rather if there were a need to change that structure, it would cost more.
Right, so I was trying to make sure I was understanding, because I saw and I saw your response, but it's helpful to have that additional explanation that there could be like a $2,000 or $3,000 increase, you know, with some of those positions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in the past I've said I'm anxious to be seeing significant increases in administrative positions, and you've explained that. So,
Yeah, that this does not do that.
okay.
All right, I'll go ahead and call this for a vote, starting with Board Member Longwell. Oh, Charlotte?
Yeah. I just wanted to just comment on the equity position. I mean, Board Member Anderson said that we would be doing this reorg on the back of equity. And that, you know, that doesn't feel too good. But I do know that you talked about putting equity all the way through, not just in one department, but all departments. But could you tell us how you would do that?
So there is in the ECAP expectations, where our evaluation of leaders, there is an expectation of making decisions based on equity and attending to issues of equity, that's part of the leadership expectation. The other pieces I had argued is there are two schools of thought. One says that by making a separate equity office, you make it more important. Another says by embedding equity within the core of the work, you make it more important. I'm of the mindset that embedding it in the core of the work makes it more important. And so they're placing it with school leadership, ties that work directly with schools, and provides an accountability mechanism that way, so that somebody in a different office isn't asking somebody in another office to do something, but rather that's part of the direct accountability within the leadership office. So that's the kind of the theory of action, I guess, that I'm moving forward on in setting up this recommendation.
Okay, can I follow up on that? How would an area director keep that as a priority, though? If it's not, would it get diluted with all their other responsibilities? How is that going to be I mean, it's part of our mission, right? It's our,
Yeah.
so, and could we have both? Like, could you have, if you had,
Be a reason to have both. Is
I
that
mean,
what you mean,
I'm-
both positions?
not both positions, I mean, if you had an equity director, but you also had it embedded throughout. It seems like it should be.
I think
But-
I'm arguing two things here.
Okay.
One is, as you said, having it across the organization. It is a leadership expectation across the organization, and that's part of how we operate now. The other piece is, where within a district organization does that chair sit? And so that's the one where I'm making the argument that I think it's actually more powerful if they're sitting at the table with area directors talking about the priorities of the district and the pieces of implementation that have to happen, that we strengthen their hand when they're sitting at that table, which is what Dr. Taylor's going to hold that table with those people together. So,
I'm sorry, I forgot about that position had been moved, and, yeah.
okay, thanks, Charlotte.
Great. I'll go ahead and call for a vote, starting with Board Member Longwell.
Amanda Longwell, yes.
Charlotte.
Charlotte Fife Jefferson, yes.
Ashley Anderson, no.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed Bade, yes.
Ryan Jensen, yes, and I will just add that we also had opportunities to talk with Superintendent Grant in meetings with her in her office. So when we talk about the time that we've spent in board meetings, there's that time, but then there were also times when you arranged for us to come and be able to meet with you, and I appreciate having had that time as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. We have 3 items left. The first one is the board calendar. I'll accept a motion to add April 30th, 2025, 5 to 8 to the board calendar.
I move that we add April 30th from 5 to 8 p.m. to the board calendar.
Second.
All right, we got a motion and a second on the table. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll start with a roll call vote with Charlotte.
Charlotte Fife Jefferson, yes.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
Ryan Jensen, yes.
Amanda Longwell, yes.
All right, that passes. Up next is Unified Sports. I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion to approve unified sports.
Second.
A motion and a second. Discussion?
Yes, in getting out of the habit of saying we approve a thing without saying what that means, is saying approve unified sports actually a clear statement?
Could you clarify it, Janine?
Looks like Emily's left.
As presented, is that helpful, or?
How about
Well, when it's as presented, what we found, for instance, with,
approve district participation in unified sports along with the requested, the requested budget?
Amanda, will you reframe the motion, please? Thank you, Ashley.
Can you insert my voice into yours?
He's not a board member, but Christina.
I'll mime, you say it. I make a motion to
Approve district participation in
approve
unified
district
sports.
participation
And the budget.
In unified sports,
and the budget in unified sports,
along with the requested budget.
along with the requested budget. Thanks.
Second.
All right, any discussion? Seeing none, we'll take it to a vote, starting with Board Member Anderson.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
Brian Jensen, yes.
Amanda Longwell, yes. Yes.
Charlotte Fife Jefferson, yes.
All right, that motion passes.
And thank you, Ashley, for clarifying that. We have had problems in the past when we're not
Yeah,
clear
is-
about that.
That's valuable.
Yeah.
Our last is our bond consideration, authorizing the issuance and sale of up to $155 million. I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we adopt the consideration of a resolution authorizing the issuance and sale of up to $155 million of general obligation bonds and providing for related matters.
Is there a second?
A second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, we'll start with a roll call vote with Ashley.
Ashley Anderson, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Mohammed, yes.
Brian Jensen, yes.
Amanda Longwell, yes.
Charlotte Fife Jefferson, yes.
All right, that motion passes. That concludes our action agenda. We will move on to reports.
Yes, and I'm going to try and be fast, but there were so many good things. I am sorry, I'll try and be quick on this. First of all, the West High girls basketball team and the Highland High boys basketball team both played in the finals of the state championships. And it was a disappointing night, but actually pretty impressive that they were there. And congrats to them. We're going to find some time to give them recognition in board meeting. West High School's Kathy Bernard has been named. Again, this is just kind of amazing. The 2025 Foreign Language Teacher of the Year for the state of Utah. Pretty impressive, and so we'll find some time to celebrate that. We had 4 of our National Board Certified Teachers who were National Board Certified Teachers were recognized at the legislature. Our 4 members of the leadership team are from Salt Lake City School District: John Arthur, Tony Zanni, Carrie Johnson and Emily Petty. Another celebration here, Olivia Avila, a program specialist in our community education after-school program, has been named a Next Generation honoree by the National After School Association. So impressive there. A West High student, Brunel Tazin, will represent West High School at the State Poetry Out Loud competition in just a few days, performing at the Mid-Valley Performing Arts Center. She won last week in our regional competition, and she will represent the state at the national finals in DC in May. So pretty impressive. She has to recite 3 poems from memorization to compete. East High swimmer Glenn Tanner took home the state championship title last month in the 100-meter freestyle.
Nice.
Pretty great. Our welding teacher at West High School, Denise Hevner, was made a sorry, at Highland. Did I say something else?
Yeah, you said West.
Wow, that was weird. Because I love this program at Highland High and what she's built there. She is a Utah Hockey Club nominee as the most valuable teacher. And people can vote online for her. And if she wins that, she gets to go to the National Hockey League Championships, which I think might be kind of fun. So hooray for that. And I'm sorry, I'm just going to pull up one more list here that our Parkview third grade teachers, Bridget Love, Peter Saunders, Janie Hansen, deserve a little shout out along with their math coach Lindsay De Pasquale. Okay, I'm going to get the accent on that right. Because the state board members came to visit their class just to see good teaching going on in third grade at Parkview. So a huge shout out to them on that. Hayden Godfrey, East High social studies teacher, is one of 15 teachers from across the country selected to participate in the 2025 Transatlantic Study Trip to Germany for U.S. teachers. He will travel there in June, and it's a fully funded opportunity. Northwest Middle School's having their History Day on March 7th, just if you want to mark that. And National Civics Week is March 10th through 14th, and our schools will be engaged in that. I've got to say, we're getting a little place on the map for our Seal of Civic Readiness, and this was done by our teaching and learning team with Dr. Hall in the lead, along with Desi Olson, to create, and with the whole team, to create this Seal of Civic Readiness. Other superintendents are already asking about it. This idea that we can create citizens and mark their progress with the Seal of Civic Readiness. We'll provide a time for you to present that a little more to the board, I think. And then on March 5th, Suzanne Arthur and Holly Reynolds, West High's social studies teacher, will participate on a panel to inform legislators more about civic education and the landscape in Utah, what the Seal of Civic Readiness looks like, and just wanted to say shout out to them. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Gann. Charlie, any reports?
Yes, I just wanted to say that I, along with a few of my other fellow board members, attended the CTE open house at Slick. I mean, it's in our CTE there. And that was really impressive. I didn't really know that we had that many CTE opportunities and programs. Yeah, across the district. So, I mean, we saw the CTE classes that are taught there, but then also teachers from across the district were there touting their site-specific programs. So very exciting. And then looking forward to going on a tour of the Catalyst CTE Center next week.
Great.
Where is that again?
Davis.
In Davis. So that is the one that the legislature went gaga over, right? So it could give us some ideas of what our potential is. Yeah. And then I also wanted to, well, I don't have it pulled up, but it's Utah Loves Public Schools. That, there's a website. Anyway, it's a growing number of people who are really showing their appreciation for public education. Loves public education. And so I really like that we're championing our public education and our high quality teachers in our district in particular.
Yes.
So I might share that on my own page.
Oh, please do.
Yeah.
Utah Loves publicschools.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
UtahLovesPublicSchools.com.
Yeah.
Yeah, check it out.
Mohammed, do you have a report this evening?
Yes. First of all, Ramadan Kareem. Let me just give a little bit of a brief of what Ramadan stands for. Ramadan is not just about not eating from dawn to sunset. It is more about, worshiping. It is more about appreciating what it's like. You would be fasting, and then at the end of the day you have food, but then you think, about other people across the world who do not have, that opportunity to be able to, feast at the end of the day. And also Ramadan's commemoration, it commemorates actually the revelation of Quran on the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So the world, the 2 billion Muslims across the world, those who are able to fast are able to fast. And those who are not able to, they are forgiven, and they are also, contribute by giving alms to the poor. To make up for not being able to fast. And so, and if I may, I'm just gonna, wish happy Ramadan in Arabic to the Muslim and Arab community. Ramadan Kareem wa kullu aamin wa antum bi khair. أسأل العلي العظيم على أن يجعل هذا الشهر شهر الرحمة والمغفرة والسلام. وخصوصا لإخواننا وأخواتنا الذين هم في مسارح الحروب. نتمنى من العلي القدير بأن يجعل هذا الشهر شهر المغفرة. وبهذا أتمنى لكل من هو في سالت ليك سيتي وعبر العالم شهر رمضان كريم. شكرا.
I'll dovetail Ramadan Kareem. I'm learning from Muhammad the significance of language in these special moments for our Muslim community here in Salt Lake and around the world. I want to give a shout out to Layla Gokbi. She emailed our board this morning with suggestions for our district about how we can not only better serve our Muslim community, but how we can honor and respect what our students who are observing Ramadan, what we could be doing in our schools to serve them in a more meaningful way. It included things like creating a space during the lunch hour so that students have that kind of quiet space to reflect and to pray, teaching genuine lessons about Ramadan and Muslim culture and history and the religion. A number of other suggestions were made. I was able to forward that to Dr. Grant, who forwarded it to Dr. Taylor, and those suggestions have been filtered out to our school communities. So one, thank you, Layla, thank you, Dr. Grant, and Lisa and Dr. Taylor for making that happen. I've had a busy couple of weeks in between the last two board meetings, and between the last board meeting and this one. I got to go to a CTE classroom. It was the Fire Cadet program over at Innovations, and let me tell you, they kicked my butt. Box jumps, push-ups, not only push-ups, but plyo push-ups, which means you have to actually leave the ground when you are in the top of the push-up, so your hands have to leave the ground. Making it a little bit harder to push this almost 200 pounds off the ground. But nonetheless, and then a lot of kettlebell swings and some drills. Amazing program, amazing opportunity. The instructors were great, Captain Barrett, and they let me know that they are accepting applications. I might have to entertain them on that, but nonetheless, it was an amazing experience. Brian and I had the opportunity to be down at Nebo School District offices last Saturday. It was 2 Saturdays ago.
2 Saturdays ago.
For a training for board leaders, board presidents and vice presidents. A very awesome experience, and I know Brian and I can bring more of what we learned to the board at a later time. And then I'm also looking forward to participating as a judge at Northwest for the science fair. Topics of Brown versus Board of Education, Madrigal versus Killigan, the Salem witch trials will all be things that I'll be hearing about from our students. I'm really looking forward to it. Brian?
Well, I would just echo both Nate and Charlotte. I thought the board leadership training on February 22nd was beneficial, and I am trying to learn how to be a better board leader, so continue to work on that. I had the opportunity, well, I went to the CTE open house, and it really is exciting to see how many opportunities our students have.
Yeah.
And we have lots that we can build on. And then I went and had a CTE training in broadcasting at Highland High, and this is where I can say to my children that I'm not completely technologically challenged, because I did an animation on my, well, under direction, but I did it, with the Highland Ram, my alma mater. So anyway, it was a lot of fun.
Helena?
Yeah, I just want to shout out everyone who went to the HOSA competitions yesterday and today, the Health Careers Conference. And
Say what you won.
well, I got second and third, so thank you. West, I know, had around 160 members there, and West ELP swept for second and third in multiple events, so congrats to them. And East was also there, so congrats to everyone who competed and won.
People have taken many of my items because I did, like everybody, go to the CTE open house, volunteer in a CTE classroom to be a student for the day, and also will be judging at Northwest Science Fair. But I wanted to share 2 items of semi-business, and one is that at the West and Highland Games, I was able to sit with some of our opponents from Canyon School District and their peer board members, and we talked a little bit about the way they managed athletics during their high school rebuilds, specifically from principals of the school who are now serving as athletic directors. And I just wanted to pass on to Alan and Isaac, as well as the whole board, that they would be an incredible resource, and I think we should talk to those peer districts about how they managed a lot of.
Attended the Unified Basketball Tournament in Murray. It was fabulous to see the excitement of the students, the students with disabilities, the general education peers, the parents. It was just beyond wonderful. So if anybody gets the opportunity to do that, I highly suggest it. I attended Emerson STEM Night. It was really fun to see that. CTE. I'll be visiting Nibley Park tomorrow, spending time there with the principals and whomever's around. Then the Community Technical Education Center, I do separately have a couple hours set aside there, although the more I'm hearing about your experiences as to the courses they put you through, I am now nervous. Oh my goodness. The Davis Catalyst Center, I'll be attending the USB Spring Regional next week, and attending the film screening Counted Out that Tiffany Hall brought to our attention. A few things, so trying to really get out there to support the community and learn more about our district so I can hopefully better represent. So.
Cool. Okay, and Brian?
Thank you, Amanda, for reminding us about that regional meeting. Yep. Just so that you all have that on your radar next week.
Great. And then I also forgot that I'll be at the Clayton Middle School play, so if you have a chance to go up and see the play, check it out. Excellent. Everybody's going. Cool.
Yeah.
All right, I'll call the meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.